wartime president. Russian forces savage Ukraine, but after Russia's atrocities, is Ukraine's leader still willing to negotiate?
Give us weapon, give us hand, stop Russia.
My exclusive interview with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is next. Plus, the fight ahead as Ukraine braces to face Russia in the east and claims a surprise victory at sea. How long will the war last? And desperate need. With millions displaced by the war, a new push to help. Dave Matthews performs an original new song
Something to tell my baby.
in support of refugees and what you can do. Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Lviv, Ukraine, and you're watching a special hour of State of the Union. Happy Easter and happy Passover to those who celebrate. This weekend is one of hope for so many, but here in Ukraine, where it's been more than 50 days since Russian troops invaded, the destruction frankly seems limitless. Yesterday, while traveling across the country, I saw buildings, homes blown away in Borodyanka outside Kyiv. They're still digging bodies out from the rubble, bodies of families, bodies of children. Families that ran to the basement of their buildings for shelter from Putin's bombs, and they did not make it. We saw their toys that had been uncovered in the rubble. This is the cost of Putin's unprovoked war on the people of Ukraine, and the end, frankly, does not seem near as the Russian focus moves to the east. The situation in Mariupol in the south appears to have grown increasingly dire. Overnight, Ukrainians rejected an ultimatum from the Russians to surrender. I traveled to Kyiv, and I sat down with Ukraine's president, Volodymyr Zelensky, inside the office of the president. It's no exaggeration to say that President Zelensky changed the course of the war and decidedly the course of history by deciding to stay in Kyiv, to command, to lead, to fight an army many times the size of his own. Today we're devoting the show to bring you that wide-ranging conversation, beginning with the very latest from the battlefield. A Russian warship, the Moskva, the one that Ukrainian soldiers told to F off, sank. The Russians say, and the Russians are liars, but the Russians say it sank on its own. Can you offer some clarity and evidence as to what happened to that ship?
We know that it is gone. For us, it is a serious weapon against our country. That is why the fact that it sank is not a tragedy for us. I want you and everyone else to know that. The less weapons the Russian Federation who attacked our country has, the better it is for us, the less powerful they are. This is all, and it is the most important thing. And what happened to it? Time will tell.
The new Russian offensive in the east, in the Donbass, could start any day. Your administration officials have warned that it could look as big as World War II. You won the Battle of Kyiv. Are you going to win the fight for the Donbass?
For us, the battle for Donbass is very important. It is important for different reasons. For the reason of safety, first of all, our grouping that is located in Donbass is one of the best military we have. It is a large grouping, and Russia wants to encircle them and destroy them. It is nearly 40,000 people. It is 44,000 professional military men who survived a great war from the beginning of 2014. This is why it is very important for us to preserve that part of our army that is one of the most powerful. This is why it is very important for us not to allow them to stand our ground, because this battle, and it can happen, so there will be several battles, and we don't know how long it is going to take, it can influence the course of the whole war. Because I don't trust the Russian military and Russian leadership. That is why we understand that the fact that we fought them off and they left and they were running away from Kyiv, from the north, from Chernihiv, and from that direction, it doesn't mean if they are able to capture Donbass, they won't come further towards Kyiv. That is why, for us, this battle is very important for many reasons. It is very important to win this battle.
The director of the CIA warned that he's worried Putin might use a tactical nuclear weapon in this fight. Are you worried?
Not only me. I think all of the world, all the countries have to be worried, because you know that it can be not real information, but it can be the truth. Because when they begin to speak about one or another battles or involves enemies or nuclear weapons or some chemical, issues, chemical weapons, they should do it. They could do it. I mean, so they can. For them, life of the people is nothing. That's why we should think, not be afraid. I mean, not be afraid, be ready, but that is not the question to Ukraine, and not only for the Ukraine, for all the world. I think so.
There is a possibility of them using these weapons. Nobody expected there to be a full-scale invasion of Ukraine from the Russian Federation. No one expected there to be a war in 2014. And now that there will be a full-scale invasion and killing of civilians, nobody expected them to invade the areas where there is no military equipment and just kill and shoot dead the civilian population. Nobody expected that. But this is a fact. And it happened. And that is when Russia gives information and says if something goes not according to plan, they can use chemical weapons and their nuclear potential. And that is why I believe these are dangerous claims of untrustworthy people. And if we believe some of them are already untrustworthy, then they can use nuclear weapons.
How bad are things in Mariupol, and what can be done to help the people of Mariupol?
The situation is very difficult in Mariupol. It's clear that things won't get better. With each passing day, it's growing more unstable. Unfortunately, it is difficult for different reasons. I will not talk about the cruelty with which the Russian authorities have treated Mariupol, the Russian military. There are two components. No one knows how many people died among the civilian population. If anyone gives you a figure, it would be a total lie. Hundreds of thousands were evacuated. Several thousand, tens of thousands, were forced to evacuate in the direction of the Russian Federation. And we do not know where they are. They've left no document trail. And among them are several thousands of children. We want to know what happened to them, whether they are in good health. Unfortunately, there just isn't any information on this. And regarding what population has remained there, we also don't have a definitive answer. One day they say there are 50,000 or 60,000 left there. And then another day, someone says 100,000. And now we have information that perhaps 10,000 people have died there, all civilians who stayed. We're talking about civilian deaths, not military.
And we heard about 5,000 children deported from this region to Russian side because they didn't allow them to go to the Ukrainian side, I mean the Ukrainian control side. Yeah, that's it. So we don't know what is with their children. Where are they? Nobody knows. And so that is, and that's why I said that the question is more than difficult and more than complicated. So there are a lot of information which we have to check and which we don't know exactly.
Do you have any idea how many Ukrainian soldiers or Ukrainian civilians have been killed?
На сьогодні
As of now, based on the information we have, because it is very difficult to talk about civilians, since south of our country, where the towns and cities are blocked, Kherson, Berdyansk, Mariupol, further east, the area to the east where Volnovakha is, etc., we just don't know how many people have died in that area that is blocked. Let's take Volnovakha as an example. Volnovakha and other towns are empty. They are all destroyed. There are no people there, so it's difficult to talk about it now.
Складно. Щодо наших військових, то в порівнянні
As to our military, out of the numbers we have,
у нас є, що у нас десь
we think that we lost 2,500 to 3,000
втратили в порівнянні з
in comparison with the Russian military, who lost about 19,000 to 20,000.
таке порівняння, але у нас
That's the comparison. But we have about 10,000 injured,
мені складно сказати.
and it's hard to say how many will survive.
President Biden is considering whether to send a top U.S. official to visit Ukraine. Who does President Zelensky want to visit? That's next. Plus, the personal side, Zelensky is also raising 2 kids with his wife. While he leads the country through war, we're going to talk about how his kids are doing. That's coming up. Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper. I'm live in Lviv, Ukraine. We've been hearing these horrifying stories about the violence, the barbarity perpetrated by Russian soldiers on Ukrainian civilians. President Zelensky, he talked about bearing witness to the unimaginable and how he thinks Russia should be punished. I have to warn you that some of the images you're about to see are rather graphic and disturbing.
I'm sure you have seen the video of the Ukrainian mom finding her son in a well. What is it like for you as the president of this country to see those videos, to hear the crying of the moms?
Найстрашніше, що я бачив в житті, в принципі.
This is the most horrifying thing I have seen in my life.
Як батько, перш за все.
I look at this first of all as a father. It hurts so much. It's a tragedy. It is suffering. I won't be able to imagine the scale of suffering of these people, of this woman.
Трагедія для сім'ї – це нещастя.
It is a family's tragedy. It is a disaster. It is the dreams and the life you've just lost.
Ми живемо, і це правда. І тому що це
We live for our kids. That's true.
І сім'я дає. І тому це для мене великий біль.
Kids are the best we were given by God, by family. It is a great pain for me.
І після цього хочеться тільки
I can't watch it as a father, only because all you want after this is revenge and to kill.
дивитись. І як президент.
I have to watch it as the president of the state, where a lot of people have died and lost their loved ones.
Своїх рідних. І є мільйони людей, які
And there are millions of people who want to live.
хочуть жити.
All of us want to
Ми
fight.
всі хочемо боротися, але ми
But
повинні
we all have to do our best for this war
щоб
not
ця
to be
війна
endless.
була нескінченною.
The longer it is, the more we would lose.
Чим довше вона, тим більше ми будемо втрачати.
All these losses will be just like that one.
Я не впевнений і не вірю, коли говорять, що ми
I'm not sure
все, аби такі батьки, такі матері.
and not confident that when we say we'll do our best for these mothers to feel the government is taking care of them,
І я не вірю, що можна цю рану.
I do not believe this wound can be treated or forgotten somehow.
Лічити. Я не впевнений, що хтось може допомогти цій жінці.
I'm not sure anyone can help this woman.
Я не впевнений.
I'm not sure.
Що люди
I'm not sure.
найбільше, що
I think people have lost the best they had.
є результат війни Росії. Вони
It is
прийшли.
the outcome of Russia's war.
Найголовніше, що було.
They came and took away the most important things people had.
Але чи
I know these people are
заспокоїть
heroic,
їх?
but are my words going to give them peace? No.
Це просто страшний біль.
It's just great pain.
І так
We can all work on how to rebuild apartments and houses and compensate them.
домівки, як компенсувати
How do you compensate for the loss of a child?
втрату дитини. Я думаю, що ніхто в світі
I don't think anyone in the world has an answer for that.
ще це не придумав. Думаю, це тільки бажання справедливості через
There is a desire for justice through revenge,
як мінімум, щоб тим людям,
and that at least the people who did this would feel the same pain,
і як мінімум, щоб був якийсь результат,
so that there will be some result, some outcome, so they are punished.
були наказані.
You lost ancestors in the Holocaust. Every year on Holocaust Remembrance Day, politicians put out statements that say never again, never again. Those statements must seem really hollow right now to you. When the world says never again, do they ever mean it?
I don't believe the world. After we see what's going on in Ukraine, I mean that I don't believe to this feeling that we should believe to the some countries or some leaders. We don't believe the words. After escalation of Russia, we don't believe our neighbors. We don't believe all of this. Even I don't believe documents, because we also had a Budapest memorandum. I think you know all the details of this. For me, that is just a piece of paper, and costs nothing, and that's it. So we just believe contractic, pragmatic things. If you are our friends or partners, give us weapon, give us hand, give us support us, give us money, and stop Russia, kick Russia. You can do it if you are a friend. If you think about this, you know, this democracy and everything. Yes, all these moments. If we have the same thoughts. If we are speaking about freedom, not because we want to have dialogue about freedom. If we are really things. Yes, if we're real, the same thoughts. I mean,
the only belief there is belief in ourselves, in our people, belief in our armed forces, and the belief that countries are going to support us, not just with their words, but with their actions. And that's it.
Never again.
Really, everybody is talking about this, and yet, as you can see, not everyone has got the guts.
President Biden called what Putin is doing here genocide. President Macron of France said that he didn't think it was constructive to raise the rhetoric like that it wasn't healthy. What was your response to both Biden and Macron?
Я такої ж думки, як президент Байден.
I have the same opinion as President Biden, and I immediately saw what was happening here.
Після того, що сталося в Бучі і на сході нашого.
Especially what happened in Bucha and in the east of our country.
Тому що це навіть Росія казала, що це військова операція.
I speak about this because Russia calls it a military operation and not a war. But look what happened in Bucha. It's clear that is not even a war. It's a genocide. It just killed people, not soldiers, people. They just shot people in the streets. People were riding bicycles, taking the bus, or just walking down the street. There were corpses lining the streets. These were not soldiers. They were civilians. They bound their hands. They forced children to watch as they raped their mothers. Then they threw them in a well or in mass graves. Children, adults, the elderly. And we have substantial evidence that points to this being a genocide. Audio and video, where they talk about just how much they hate us. I did not even know that there was such hatred of the Russian military for the Ukrainian people. They say they are going to destroy us. Just to steal a toilet and a washing machine from an apartment, they shot an entire family. That is genocide.
Щодо Еммануеля, я вчора з ним говорив.
As far as Emmanuel, I talked to him yesterday.
Він хотів зробити якісь кроки, щоб Росія почула.
I think he wants to take some steps to ensure that Russia engages in dialogue.
Але я йому сказав, що
I just told him that I want him to understand
щоб зрозуміти, що
that this is not war, but nothing other than genocide.
Для цього треба сюди приїхати. Я його запросив.
I invited him to come when he will have the opportunity. He'll come and see, and I'm sure he will understand.
Все це зрозуміє.
Do you want President Biden to come here?
Yes?
Are there any plans for him to come?
I think he will.
You think he will?
I think he will. And I think but it's his decision, of course, and about the safety situation, it depends. I mean, but I think he's the leader of the United States, and that's why he should come here to see.
What about the more than 4 million Ukrainians who have left the country, who are refugees? Do you want them to come back?
Not now. I think not now. First of all, it's about women and children. They should come when the situation will be stabilized, and when the war will finish, of course, because they will not help us now. It's not about the men; they will not help. Men should be here and should fight, and then the families will come back, of course, because I know the statistics about the 93-95% of those people who arrived away because of the war, they want to come back, really.
President Zelensky still wants to negotiate with Russia, but after the atrocities at Bucha, is there anything the Ukrainian people would be willing to give up to Putin? And later, Dave Matthews has a new song in honor of refugees. He's going to perform it for us for the very first time, and we'll talk about how we can all help. Stay with us.
Someday we're
Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper, live in Lviv, Ukraine, as Ukraine prepares for a difficult battle in the east. The U.S. is stepping up its military assistance. But is Zelensky's goal to beat Russia on the battlefield or to come to an agreement with Putin at the negotiating table?
President Biden just agreed to another $800 million in military aid for Ukraine, bringing the total American contribution to $2.5 billion. Are you satisfied with that? Do you need more?
А вже ж нам потрібно більше.
Of course, we need more. But I am happy that he is helping us now. I feel that right now we are having a cleaner dialogue. It's been a dialogue that's had some twists and turns, and not just talk. It's been very, very difficult, because there aren't many countries that have really helped us.
І Сполучені Штати на чолі з президентом Байденом.
The assistance from the United States, led by President Biden, and they are doing it again today, but there will never be enough. Enough isn't possible. There is a full-scale war ongoing today, so we still need a lot more than what we have today.
На жаль, у нас немає.
Unfortunately, we do not have technical advantages over our enemy, just not on the same level there. But our people are stronger. That's our main advantage, and we know our mission, our objective, what we're fighting for. We're defending our country. All these families and the kids that we discussed before, we know what we stand for and from where we get our strength. But for Biden's confirmed $800 million in support, what's most important is speed.
The Biden administration keeps saying that they're giving you this aid to put Ukraine in a better negotiating position for a diplomatic solution. Is that the goal, to put you in a better negotiating position, or is the goal to defeat Russia and get them to leave?
Ми повинні розуміти.
We need to understand that what we want can come at a very high price. And in any case, all these years of war, where is the compromise coming from the Russian Federation? Maybe we can end this war without any conditions. Maybe the war can end without any dialogue or compromise.
Щоб сідати за стіл перемовин з президентом Росії.
And without sitting down at the negotiating table with the president of Russia.
Ти розумієш цю ціну.
And you'll understand daily. As I said before, what's the price of all this? It's people, the many people who have been killed. And who ends up paying for all of this? It's Ukraine. Just us.
І тому для нас це
So for us, this is a really great cost. If there is an opportunity to speak, we'll speak. But to speak only under a Russian ultimatum? It's then a question about attitude towards us, not about whether the dialogue is good or bad. It's impossible. The sooner it happens, it just means that less are likely to die. But it's not a fact that this would actually be the case. Not at all. But it's possible, and therefore we should try. We want to liberate our country, take back what's ours. We can fight the Russian Federation for 10 years to take what's ours. We can go down such a path, but you have to understand what you are doing. Know your strength. Remember that you are not fighting alone. And can you imagine that you would fight one-on-one with a very large state?
яка у 28 разів більше.
One that's 28 times larger than us? In terms of territorial size and economy, and their army is larger. And one cannot fight on their character alone. To fight as one, there needs to be equipment today or tomorrow, not in 2 or 3 months. Some countries are just not offering assistance. They can send millions, but we could still lose our state.
Ти повинен обрати баланс.
That's why one has to strike a balance. Whether you want to or not, you are not the only hero. The people are the heroes, and we must protect their lives maximally. The conditions must be humane, if in fact that's even possible. We cannot give up our territory, but we must find at least some dialogue with Russia, if they are capable, and if we are still ready. But the chances of this are growing less by the day. There comes a time when, think about Bucha, or Borodyanka, Volnovakha, Izum, Mariupol. After all that, No one wants to talk. Our society doesn't want us to continue talks. This is a great tragedy.
What do you say to people, either in Ukraine or elsewhere in the world, who say, just give Putin the Donbass, just give Putin eastern Ukraine, stop the bloodshed, let him have the territory? What would your message be about that?
Багатовікова історія України стояла саме.
In the centuries-old history of Ukraine, there is the story that Ukraine has either taken some territory or needs to give up some territory.
Сьогодні України
Ukraine and the people of our state are absolutely clear.
абсолютно чітке, тверезе розуміння. Нам нічого чужого не потрібно.
We don't want anyone else's territory,
Не віддамо.
and we are not going to give up our own.
He's a leader, but he's also a dad who's worried about his family. I asked President Zelensky about how they're coping. Next, stay with us. Welcome back to State of the Union. I'm Jake Tapper, and I'm live in Lviv, Ukraine, as Russian troops began their attack on Ukraine almost 2 months ago. Ukraine's president said he was Russia's #1 target and that his family was a close second. So I asked President Zelensky how his family is dealing with that strain as we were setting up the interview and later to reflect on Passover and his legacy.
How are your wife and kids? Are they okay?
Normal. Thank you so much.
They're okay?
Yeah.
How old are your kids?
My daughter is almost 18 and son is 9.
I have a
Almost 9.
12-year-old boy and
Yeah.
a 14-year-old girl.
Go.
So it's very...
You understand me? 14 years ago, I
Yes.
think we understand.
Yeah. I call my daughter and she's like, can't talk, Dad. Very busy.
Not now.
Very busy.
Yes, I know it. Without knocking to the door, I can't speak with my
Right.
daughter.
Right.
And that's good.
I know you're not observant, but it's Passover and it's the Jewish celebration of freedom. And I'm wondering if there is a message for not just the Jews of Ukraine, but all of Ukraine in the message of resilience in difficulty and also freedom, the message of freedom.
I believe the way we fight for our freedom is the most important message. Because you can send a lot of messages with words, and they come from different people. But when it comes to actions, only a few act on their words. And today, I believe Ukrainian people show by their actions that they are fighting and protecting freedom, a principle of freedom. And principles are everywhere. And if our people won't be able to protect freedom in their own country, it will be a signal to all other countries that it is allowed to just come and stab, come and shoot, come and take other people's land. I believe the way our people act today is a signal to the whole world.
There is a chance that you will not survive this war. The Russians have made it clear that they consider you a Nazi, etc., all that nonsense. How do you want the Ukrainian people to remember you? How do you want your son and daughter to remember you?
A human being that loved life to the fullest, and loved his family, and loved his motherland. Definitely not a hero. I want people to take me as I am, a regular human.
You've inspired a lot of people, including not just here in Ukraine, but around the world. Who inspires you? Who are your heroes? Whose story do you look to for inspiration during dark days here?
Only the people. I believe our people are genuine and unique. And I just can't afford to be worse than them. When at certain moments I feel like all of this is dangerous, I understand that all the rest of us are going through this as well. What people are feeling like, who are in basements, who lost their children, what our soldiers feel like right now. And I understand I have to be the strongest one in this situation, and this is all. And the most important is the way my children look at me. They have to be proud of me. This is the most important thing. I do everything for this.
Is Ukraine going to win this war?
Yes, of course. And will.
Thank you so much for your time, President Zelensky.
Thank you so much.
Best of luck. Best of luck with what you do.
Thank you so much.
Up next, we have something else unique and special on this Sunday. Dave Matthews is going to debut a brand new song in support of refugees, and we're going to talk about ways that you can help if you can, so stick around. The United Nations says more than 4.5 million refugees have fled Ukraine since the start of the war. It's an enormous humanitarian crisis that's spurring so many people to try to help, including my next guest. You might have heard of him, Dave Matthews. He's trying to help the best way he knows how. And Dave, I know you've been really moved by the stories of the refugees from Ukraine and, frankly, refugees from all over the world.
Well, first of all, thank you, Jake, for having me. And thanks for your efforts right now to bring awareness to what's happening over there. My mom used to always say that war is sort of like madness. It's like a cancer. It's like cells gone awry. It's suddenly everything that we really naturally care about, other humans and our family, gets torn apart. And like it's happening right now where you are in Ukraine, it's just unfathomable to those of us who are far from it. But it's not only happening there, it's happening in Yemen, it's happening in Myanmar, it's happening in Nigeria. There's just so many places where, Afghanistan, where people are trying to just survive, and it's violence that's not allowing them to, and terrible violence. And so those of us, so many of us are part of this chorus of people that are trying to, or hoping that we can somehow turn the tide. And so I thought I would just join in and in as many ways as possible raise people's awareness, and so get some friends together and play a song that I just finished writing that I think somehow pertains to it, but at least it pertains to all of us. It's called Something to Tell My Baby. Thank you very much, Jake.
Someday we're all gonna leave here, maybe sooner than we wanted. It's special because it's fleeting, all of the things that we did. What do we leave behind us? Something that will remind them, something to make them smile when they think about it, something to tell my baby, something she can reach for. We all need to hold on to when we're trying to believe in stuff that dreams are made of, the cut that just won't heal, the smoke after the fire. As long as we remember, it's as good as real, as good as real. It's something to keep us hopeful, something to tell my baby, forever at the ending, impossible but just maybe. When you think about it, there's something to remind them that's gonna make them smile and maybe make things easier, something to tell my baby.
Thanks again, Jake. And hey, I just wanted to say there's so many organizations. Maybe you can put them on the screen, but like the IRC and, World Central Kitchen, Jose Andres, there's so many great organizations that can help, are helping in their different ways to try and alleviate the suffering of people. around the world and there in Ukraine. So everybody do what you can, you know, and let's take care of each other, because what's the point otherwise?
Dave, thank you so much. That was so special and moving. I have up on the screen right now one way viewers can donate to World Central Kitchen and to dozens of others of worthwhile accredited charities. Please visit cnn.com/impact, cnn.com/impact. Experts are now predicting that this horrific war might last the whole year, if not longer. And I'm worried that folks around the world might already be starting to shrug and hold up their hands in frustration and even turn away, as we do, as the world does, so dishonoring the promise of never again. Let's try to pledge to each other right now on this Easter, on this Passover, on this Ramadan, to try and not retreat into the numb safety of looking away. The people of Ukraine, like those of Yemen and Syria and Myanmar and Darfur and Rwanda and Bosnia and Herzegovina and Cambodia, they deserve at the very least our attention. Fareed Zakaria, GPS, is up next.
This is GPS, the Global Public Square. Welcome to all of you in the United States and around the world. I'm Fareed Zakaria, coming to you live from New York. Today on the show, Russia threatens to send nuclear weapons to its western borders, not to deal with Ukraine, but rather Finland and Sweden, who may soon ask for NATO membership. What happens if they do? I will talk to Sweden's former Prime Minister, Carl Bildt. And understanding the breadth of Putin's clampdown inside Russia, including this week's jailing of another prominent Putin critic. I'll be joined by Bill Browder, who was once the largest foreign investor in Russia. Then, China under lockdown as COVID comes back to the country where it originated with a vengeance. 25 million people in Shanghai alone are under very strict measures. I'll check in with one of them, CNN's David Culver. But first, here's my take. Ukraine's brave and brilliant response to Russia's attack is rightly being celebrated across the world. But it might be obscuring a growing danger. While the assault on Kyiv and the surrounding region has failed, Moscow's strategy in the south and east of Ukraine could well succeed. If it does, Russia will have turned Ukraine into an economically crippled rump state, landlocked and threatened on three sides by Russian military power, always vulnerable to another incursion from Moscow. It will take much more military assistance from the West to ensure that this catastrophic outcome does not come to pass. As Can Kosopoglu, a military scholar and strategist, presciently pointed out in the first few weeks of the war in an essay for the Hudson Institute, there are two distinct wars taking place in Ukraine, one in the north and one in the south. And the latter has been radically more successful for Moscow than the one in the north. Russia has been able to move forces and supplies out of its bases in Crimea and capture the cities of Melitopol and Kherson, while surrounding the city of Mariupol. The latter is now encircled and invaded by Russian troops, and Ukrainian forces trapped in there cannot be resupplied. Ukraine's access to the Sea of Azov has been blocked, and as Kasapoglu points out, Russian forces now have a contiguous land corridor from Crimea deep into Donbass. They are also trying to move west from Kherson to Odessa. Odessa is the prize. As the main port from which Ukraine trades with the world, it is the most important city for Ukraine economically. It's also a city replete with symbolic significance. It was here in 1905 that a mutiny on the battleship Potemkin, made famous by Sergei Eisenstein's movie, marked the beginning of the troubles of Tsarist Russia. Were Odessa to fall, Ukraine would be practically landlocked and the Black Sea would essentially become a Russian lake, which would almost certainly tempt Moscow to then extend its military power into Moldova, which has its own breakaway region filled with many Russian speakers, Transnistria. Putin could present this outcome as a grand victory, liberating Russian speakers, gaining crucial cities and ports, and turning Ukraine into a non-viable vassal state. This must not happen, and the Ukrainians are fighting ferociously to prevent it. In Ukraine's east, the Russians are trying to advance from Kherson through the city of Mykolaiv, but they are being stymied by the extraordinary courage of the city's inhabitants, who have reportedly blown up the bridge that connects the city to Odessa and blocked the railway tracks. This week, Ukrainian forces were able to deploy their never-before-used Neptune missiles and sink the Russian missile cruiser Moskva. Still, it's important to remember that before the invasion, Russia had a 10-to-1 advantage in defense spending over Ukraine, and Putin seems determined to press on no matter the costs. So what can the United States and the West do? Much more of everything they are already doing. Ukraine needs more arms, especially those that give it massive asymmetrical fighting power. General Mark Hertling, who has been farsighted in diagnosing Russia's weaknesses and Ukraine's strengths, explained to me that Ukraine needs more equipment that allows it to maneuver quickly around Russia's rigid forces. That means helicopters, armed Humvees, multiple launch rocket systems, drones of every kind. Turkish drones have proved to be an amazingly effective weapon in this conflict. General Hertling urges that Ukraine be given more of those as well as American kamikaze drones and intelligence drones. The Russian Navy, which has been massing in the Black Sea, continues to pose a great danger to Odessa, threatening to either lay siege to it or launch an amphibious landing behind Ukrainian lines. Despite the success of the Neptune missile, Ukraine does not have the capacity to stop the Russian Navy. NATO should consider doing something similar to what it did during the Balkan Wars of the 1990s. It should enforce an embargo around those waters, preventing Russian troops from entering to attack Ukraine's cities or resupplying Russian forces. NATO ships would operate from international waters, issuing any approaching ships notice to mariners that NATO forces are active in the area and warnings not to enter. Admiral James Stavridis, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO, supports the actions the Biden administration has taken, but urges a more aggressive response from the West on all fronts. Give Ukraine fighter planes and air defense systems, he tweeted. Help it with cyber attacks and give it anti-ship missiles to sink Russian ships in the Black Sea. The United States has appropriated about $16 billion in aid to Ukraine. Meanwhile, the world is expected to pay about $320 billion to Russia this year for its energy. Economic sanctions will not force Putin to end the war as long as this gaping loophole exists. The only pressure that will force Putin to the negotiating table is military defeat in the south. Putin's Plan A failed, but we cannot let his Plan B succeed. Go to cnn.com/Fareed for a link to my Washington Post column this week. And let's get started. Let's get the latest state of play in Mariupol and the rest of the war from CNN's Matt Rivers, who joins us now from Lviv. Matt, what are you hearing about Mariupol, where the Russian forces are moving in?
Yeah, Fareed, so as of about 4 hours ago, a deadline that for an ultimatum that was given by the Russians for all remaining Ukrainian resistance fighters in the city of Mariupol to lay down their arms and surrender has passed. That was about 4 hours ago, and the Ukrainians said they would not be respecting that ultimatum. They said that they would be ignoring it instead and continuing the defense of their city. The Russians have since acknowledged that the Ukrainians have ignored that ultimatum and said that they vowed to, quote, eliminate any Ukrainian resistance that remains in the city should they decide to keep on fighting. And what all of that means, Fareed, is that the siege of the city of Mariupol, which has gone on for weeks now, to devastating effect in that city, not only for the Ukrainian fighters in that situation, but also for the hundreds of thousands of civilians that live in that city, will likely continue at this point. And Fareed, I should note, there are about 100,000 citizens that Ukraine says still need to be evacuated from Mariupol. Not one evacuation corridor was agreed to between the Russians and the Ukrainians, which means throughout the day on Sunday, all of those tens of thousands of people remain trapped and they can't leave.
Matt, the pictures we've seen are devastating, and it feels like the civilian casualties are probably a lot higher than people realize, possibly in the tens of thousands. What are you hearing very quickly about resupply? Are there arms getting through to the Ukrainians?
No, the simple answer is no. We've heard a little bit here and there about maybe some arms being able to trickle in, but what we've heard from the defenders that remain in that city is that they have not only gotten new ammunition, but also fresh food, fresh water, the kinds of things that they would need to sustain a fight for a long time, and yet they've managed to hold on this far. We'll see how things go in the coming days, Fareed.
Matt Rivers, pleasure to have you on. Stay safe. Terrific reporting. Next on GPS, another sign that Putin didn't think all this through. Long neutral Finland and Sweden both may be on the brink of asking for NATO membership, despite Russian threats. We will explore what a geopolitical sea change this would all be when we come back with the former Prime Minister of Sweden. After decades on the periphery of NATO and the edge of Russia, Sweden and Finland are reconsidering full membership in the alliance. Polls in both countries show citizens are increasingly in favor of such a move. Finland is expected to make a decision in coming weeks, and Sweden's ruling party has started to debate the matter internally. For its part, Russia on Thursday threatened to surround its neighbors with naval forces, nuclear weapons, and more if they accede to the Western alliance. Carl Bildt was Sweden's prime minister from 1991 to 1994, and he was foreign minister during Russia's last invasion of Ukraine. Carl, welcome on the program again. Let me ask you, is this for real? Because we have heard about these kind of talks before, but is it your sense that in all likelihood Finland and Sweden will in fact apply for NATO membership?
Yes, it is for real. February 24 changed the security situation in Europe in a fairly profound way. And that has led to very sort of deep reconsideration in primarily Finland. It started in Finland, to be quite honest. I mean, the Finns have security in their DNA in another way than Swedes have, and now in Sweden. And you will see a process in both of the countries during the next few weeks that will lead to a formal application before the NATO summit in Madrid at the end of June. That's for certain, I would say.
Finland is, as you say, the most it's the most exposed. It's in some ways the most unlikely because Finland has maintained neutrality. Even during the height of the Cold War, I mean, they fought a bloody war with the Soviet Union during World War II, maintained their independence even though they lost, I don't know, 10-15% of their territory. What do you think? What is it about the situation now that has so transformed Finland's views?
That it's fairly obvious that we have a regime in the Kremlin in Moscow that behaves in ways that are sort of very different from what we had first hoped for, but then also anticipated. The fact that they've gone for full-scale invasion, really full-scale invasion, against a neighbor with the explicit purpose of more or less getting rid of that neighbor. That's sort of slightly upsetting, to put it very mildly. And that had led the security elites of Finland, and they have such, to reconsider the NATO option. They've had a NATO option for a long time, but now they're reconsidering it. And that has led also to the same discussion in Sweden. And I think both processes are very firmly moving in the same direction. It is a sea change, needless to say, but it will come.
And you've been on all sides of these kinds of things. So give us a sense of how do you think NATO will react, and will Russia's threats matter?
There will be Russian threats. We already saw it the other day when Dmitry Medvedev said that they're going to move nuclear weapons close to our country. As a matter of fact, that's already done. I mean, they have nuclear weapons in the Kaliningrad area and missiles that can hit us. They've been deployed there since years. They have up on the Kola Peninsula, that's close to the border of Norway and Finland, probably the greatest concentration of nuclear weapons anywhere in the world. So what he threatened with has actually already happened. So I don't think that will have any impact. As for NATO, that's for the NATO countries to decide. There are 30 of them that have to say yes, United States being the most important, but not the only one. But I think the indication so far, and I think rightly so, is that NATO will see this as strengthening the security and the democratic credentials of NATO in a period when NATO will be more needed than ever for the security of Europe.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Carl, but what this could do is orient Europe and give Europe a strategic orientation so that European countries realize that when they spend money on defense, it's not just make-work programs or for kind of notional territorial defense, who's going to attack Belgium, but really to secure the eastern border of Europe, the Baltic countries that have been so far thought difficult to defend. Now, if the entire orientation is to forward deploy east, you have a Europe that actually becomes more secure, correct?
I think that will be the case, and as you indicate, this is part of a wider pattern of changes that we'll see. We see increases in defense spending. Sweden, Denmark, to take that in Northern Europe, now moved up to 2%, or moving up to 2%, where the others already are. You will see Denmark having a referendum to lift some of the restrictions on EU security cooperation they have had. You will see a stronger NATO. I think you see also a stronger EU on security issues. NATO being the military alliance for territorial defense, EU having a somewhat broader array of instruments, being a security alliance. I think we'll see NATO and EU working more closely together. I think we'll see a more balanced relationship across the Atlantic. So with all of the tragedy and all of the challenges that we face, with a more dangerous Russia in the years ahead, I think we might see a strengthening of our West in Europe as a result of this, apart from the fact that I think it's necessary.
Before I let you go, I have to ask you one question, which is the one place where there does seem to be a, I don't know if a weak link is the right way to describe it, but there seems to be some problem, is Germany. The Germans tried to send their president, Steinmeier, to Ukraine. The Ukrainians, I think somewhat foolishly, rejected that offer. Now the Germans seem to be upset. Chancellor Scholz has publicly criticized the Ukrainians. Is there a danger that the Germans will not follow through on what seemed like a very robust transformation in German foreign policy?
I agree with you. I think it was foolish of the Ukrainians. I've been working together with Frank Steinmeier when we were foreign ministers, and we might have some sort of divergences. You always have that, discussing different issues. But at the end of the day, he's always been a robust supporter of our approach on Russia and supporting Ukraine. So I think it was somewhat unfair. I hope they will repair that particular damage. The change in Germany is very big. No doubt about that. And big changes don't happen in 1 week. It takes time to digest what has been happening. But I do see this change coming in German policy. It's not going to be sort of radical one day from another, but it's coming. It is very substantial increases in defense spending that are coming there. And clearly getting rid of Russian gas, it's going to take some time. It's a very big thing. Nord Stream and all of that is distinct to history. So while some would like to see all of the change come in a week's time, I think it's going to take somewhat longer time, but it will come. And what Germany does now is, of course, going to be very important for the overall stance, both of NATO and of the European Union.
Carl Bildt, always a pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on GPS, can economic sanctions really weaken Vladimir Putin? I will ask Bill Browder, who was once the largest foreign investor in Russia. Vladimir Putin's crackdown on dissent shows no signs of letting up. This week, we saw the arrest of Vladimir Kara-Murza, an outspoken critic of Putin and his war in Ukraine. On Monday, he appeared on CNN Plus and called Putin's government a regime of murderers. That same day, he was detained and sentenced to 15 days in jail. My next guest is no stranger to Putin's heavy-handed tactics. Bill Browder was once the largest foreign investor in Russia. Then Putin turned on him. He is the author of a new book, Freezing Order. Bill, you've been watching Putin for many, many years, and you in a sense called the shift early. I want to ask you if you think Putin has changed, because if you looked at the invasion of Georgia, it was limited, it was clever, it simply took nibbled away the Russian-speaking parts. This seems full frontal, reckless, as Carl Bildt was saying. It has changed Finnish foreign policy after 70 years of neutrality. Do you think Putin changed?
I think Putin has always been the same man. What he's doing right now is responding to things that he sees as threats to his own security, his threats to his own personal safety. He's a dictator. He's been around for 22 years. He's stolen enormous amounts of money. The Russian people are angry with him. And he's watched dictators in other neighboring countries, in Kazakhstan, in Belarus. In Kazakhstan, the dictator was overthrown. In Belarus, almost overthrown, only with the help of Putin stayed in power. And he saw the writing on the wall. And so what I see Putin doing right now, this is a wag the dog scenario. He's basically starting a war to distract the Russian people away from his own failings towards a foreign enemy, because he's afraid of losing power. And if he loses power, he ends up going to jail and probably dying. And so he's not, I mean, yes, it's all crazy, this full frontal invasion, but he's just responding to his own fears, and that's what this is all about.
And in the past, every time he's done one of these foreign interventions, it has,
it's uncanny. If you look at the chart, Georgia, his approval ratings go up. Crimea, his approval ratings go up, and now the same thing here. It's almost like mechanical. He starts a war and he gets higher approval ratings.
Do you think, though, that means that your theory of the case is that underneath it all, there is a lot of discontent in Russia?
Well, how could there not be? I mean, basically, all the money. So I estimate that since Putin took power until now, he and the 1,000 people around him have stolen $1 trillion from the Russian state. $1 trillion. And that money should have been spent on healthcare, education, roads, public services. And instead, it went to yachts, villas, private jets. And how can anyone be happy with a situation like that?
When I had Mikhail Khodorkovsky on the program, once Russia's richest businessman, he said that he worried that while Putin for the first, let's say, decade was busy stealing money and appropriating, siphoning off funds, he's now worried that it's even worse than that Putin is no longer interested in material gain. What he is interested in, he has these visions of being the next Peter the Great or Ivan the Terrible. He wants to leave a kind of grand mark on Russian history as having saved the Russian-speaking people. Do you see that?
Well, he's definitely not interested in money, because look at what's happened to his money. It's being frozen all over the world. So there's something else going on. But I don't think, if you take that analysis, that would say that he's got some national interest. He's interested in the greatness of Russia. But how can anyone be interested in the greatness of Russia if they've stolen all the money from the people and hollowed it out completely and absolutely? And so I would say this is more about a desperate little man who's afraid of being killed. That's really what it comes down to. He's just a small little man who is worried about the people rising up against him.
Do you think that the economic sanctions are the right way to go? What should be done? How do you put real pressure on Putin?
Well, sanctions are like medicine. It depends on when you administer the medicine to a disease, whether you stop the disease or whether it goes full force. If we had done some sanctions, even a small portion of these sanctions, early, before he invaded, just like 5% of them, so he could see that there was that we could all lock arms with our allies and do something, he might have had a different calculus. Once he's made the decision to invade, there's no changing his mind. He is a guy who never compromises, never shows weakness, never backs down. The purpose of sanctions now are very simple: to completely and absolutely starve him of the financial resources to execute this war.
But the problem is the oil and natural gas revenues keep flowing. I mean, you're a practical businessman. Realistically, Europe can't shut itself off from Russian energy. So what should they do?
Well, you're exactly right. So the war costs $1 billion a day to execute. Germany, Italy, Austria send $1 billion a day to Russia, to Putin, to buy bullets to kill Ukrainians. And so it's a real problem. They have to stop. I mean, are they going to stop 100% of that? No, but I think that it's possible and feasible to pare it down quite a bit. And there's one other thing which people don't talk about a lot, which is the oil price. Saudi Arabia could turn on the taps and pump 1 million or 2 million barrels a day extra oil, and the oil price would go down 30%. We have leverage over Saudi Arabia. We should be using it now. And if they don't back down, or if they don't cooperate in this whole thing, they should be considered part of the problem as well.
Tell us about Kara-Murza, the newly in jail dissident. You met with him. He's a friend of yours, and you urged him not to go to Russia.
I was with him 2.5 weeks ago in London. We were having dinner, and I said, where are you going next? I wanted to invite him to my book party in Washington. And he said, I'm going to Russia, but I'll be at your book party. And I said, you can't be serious. You can't be going to Russia. He said, no, I have to go. I'm an opposition politician. I'm asking the Russian people to stand up to Vladimir Putin. What message would it send if I'm too scared to go to my own country? And he went, and he got arrested. And I should point out that they've tried to kill him twice with poison. He survived 2 assassination attempts. He's now in the custody of the people who tried to kill him.
What does it say about Russian dissidents? I'm struck by how brave these people are. They were attempted poisoning. Navalny, they tried to poison. They tried to poison the president of Ukraine when he was a candidate. This was about 10, 15 years ago. They tried successfully poison many dissidents, but there still is a vibrant dissident community in Russia. Will it stay? Will it make a difference?
Well, all it takes is we don't know how this whole thing is going to play itself out, but what Alexei Navalny, who's in jail, and now Kara-Murza, who's in jail, their calculation is that at some point Putin is going to misstep. The whole country is going to rise up. There's going to be chaos, and then there's going to be a need for a new leader. And I can imagine if that were to happen, and it's happened in a lot of other countries, Navalny will be the president and Kara-Murza will be the prime minister.
Bill Browder, always a pleasure. The book is Freezing Order. The last one was #1 New York Times bestseller. Best of luck on this one. Next, 25 million people are in COVID lockdown in Shanghai alone, perhaps hundreds of millions of people across China. I will talk to CNN's David Culver, who is locked down in Shanghai himself, when we come back. After initially trying to stop the coronavirus in its tracks, most of the world eventually accepted there was no way to fully contain the virus, except for China, which has stuck to a zero COVID strategy all this time. It has reported impressive results for 2 years, but that strategy is finally breaking down. Some 400 million people are now under full or partial lockdown, according to the Japanese bank Nomura, including more than 25 million people in China's largest city, Shanghai. That city has seen a backlash as people struggle with a lack of food and basic necessities. Joining me from that lockdown in Shanghai is CNN's David Culver. David, can you describe for us what this lockdown looks like? And just remind people, we are talking about China's richest, most cosmopolitan, most international city, a city when you go to sort of dazzling skyscrapers and affluence.
And that was at one time so vibrant, Fareed, and has now come to a halt. It's really quite shocking to see. Now I'm coming to you from inside my home. I had, for the past few weeks, while still in lockdown, was using my terrace to at least some outside live reporting and have some fresh air. No longer are we allowed to use our outside patio. My door has once again been taped with a seal on it. They don't want people even opening their windows. They're trying to once again confine folks to their homes. And this was after last week they had given folks the idea that maybe there would be some sense of freedom and they would be easing restrictions a bit. Well, here we are, back to square one. So this is, to be candid, like no other lockdown. And I've covered Wuhan and many in between right here in China. And for a month, there have been various levels of lockdown here that we've been living through. And it's getting tough. And it's been very challenging. Getting food and basic necessities, that has been increasingly difficult. I've been fortunate, but some in the city are living off little to no food, shouting, "We are starving, we are starving." And Fareed, you point out, this is in Shanghai, of all places. It seems folks here are increasingly more concerned with these lockdown measures that are draconian, that are harsh, than they are with even getting the virus, Fareed.
Is there a sense, I mean, if you have had the opportunity to talk to some of these people or to see stuff on social media, do people think this is a legitimate public health strategy, maybe a little too extreme, or is it, you know, a kind of communist party that is just reacting to save face and to maintain control?
This feels out of control, Fareed, both the virus and the management of this outbreak. And with each passing day, you begin to question what exactly is happening here. I mean, the cases are spreading. This is Omicron. The West well knows that it's highly transmissible, and it's spreading within lockdown communities. I mean, if I get it, the only time I'm close to other people, and this goes for most of the folks in this city, is when we're with our neighbors for the many mandatory government COVID tests and the occasional government distribution. That's the only time we're coming together. So if after about a month's time, we've been isolated outside of those instances, well, more and more folks are raising concerns that it's actually these lockdown measures that are causing the spread. And there's increasing skepticism of the numbers, Fareed. This is something that we remember going back to Wuhan. Officially, right now, with the nearly 300,000 or so cases that the government is reporting here in Shanghai, only 13 people are listed as critically ill or severe illness. And yet our reporting, in talking to folks, as you pointed out, through social media in particular, that's been a way that we've been able to connect, even going back to Wuhan, with people who are living in the midst of this along with us. Well, they're sharing that this recent outbreak has taken the lives of their loved ones, died directly from COVID, according to the doctors that these people have been dealing with. And so the official count, though, when you look at total deaths right now, Fareed, the official government count is 0. So things are not adding up.
Now, it would seem that the solution to this, at least one solution, would be to use the vaccine that works, the mRNA vaccine, which the Chinese have not locally developed, so they would have to license a Western vaccine. Right. And this part, one thing you know the Chinese government would be able to do is to vaccinate the entire country within, you know, I don't know, a month, 2 months. But they seem resolutely opposed to that. Explain that.
And it seems politics and perhaps ego, it's pushing out science and any carefully calculated strategy at this point. Initially, when you look at the approach here, and even with the vaccinations, there was a lot of trust. People were really willing to go along with these extreme measures. I remember right after Wuhan, having left there, everyone was in it with this feeling of solidarity. They wanted to try to make the country safer as they saw it, the virus being the biggest threat, and they worked together to do that. There was this social acceptance. And so vaccinations, while they say they're officially at roughly 90% of people being fully vaccinated, the real concern is, of course, those who are 80 years or older. That number falls to about 50%. But what you're starting to then see on the streets here are protests. And that's, as you know, a rare sight in China. And I think we have a video of one instance in particular of folks who are being taken into custody by police who are in hazmat suits because they're being forced out of their homes. Now, these are not positive cases, I need to point out. They're being pulled out of their homes because their houses are being turned into quarantine centers. And so when folks are taken to quarantine facilities, they're also dealing with really poorly constructed infrastructure, unsanitary conditions. And it seems online people are starting to get creative with their backlash. So not only are we seeing the in-person protests, Fareed, but we're starting to see that for a brief period of time, they're able to post ways and certain hashtags that are very clever, and they're able to get through the censors, which we know is a heavily monitored internet here. And they're using that satire to criticize the government. And they're also calling out the perceived hypocrisy of state media, which has portrayed this as orderly and controlled. Everything is going mostly smooth. Now, the people of Shanghai, they're not ignorant. And you have to wonder if given what's been this unspoken deal with the people, this prosperity and the basic necessities for all, so long as the party remains in control without any dispute, but you have to wonder if that deal is going to fall apart after all of this, Fareed.
This story is not going to go away, and we will be back. David Culver's fascinating reporting. Thank you. Next on GPS, why China and Russia are united in trying to counter the consensus narrative on the war in Ukraine. A very interesting story when we come back. And now for the last look. To the outside world, Beijing appears engaged in a delicate dance over Russia's war in Ukraine. Far from condemnation, but unwilling to offer Russia unqualified support either. But within China's carefully controlled landscape of state-run media and social networking sites, its posture is far from neutral. In recent segments on China's central television, the network highlighted the bogus Kremlin talking point that the U.S. is funding the development of biological weapons in Ukraine. Other Chinese media have seriously taken up the equally bogus idea that Russia's invasion is a special military operation designed to weed neo-Nazis out of Ukraine. And as Li Yuan notes in a column in the New York Times, if you were to watch Chinese television, it's unlikely you'd see coverage of international condemnation of Russia or of anti-war protests in Moscow. Contrasted with the reality of the gruesome scenes from Bucha, Russian disinformation floating in Chinese media feels abhorrent. But none of this should surprise us. China and Russia have long cooperated on the dissemination of anti-Western propaganda. As Li Yuan notes, since 2015, the countries have held an annual Sino-Russia media forum with backing from top leadership. Putin once spoke of wanting to break the Anglo-Saxon monopoly on the global information streams. For the Chinese Communist Party, the war in Ukraine offers a particularly expedient opportunity to reinforce anti-Western messaging that, of course, bolsters support for Xi Jinping at home. Take a new documentary called Historical Nihilism and Soviet Collapse that has been screened for Communist Party officials in recent months. As the New York Times reports, it portrays Putin as a hero restoring Moscow to greatness. While it was produced before the war, it argues that Russia should be concerned about countries it used to control. At one point, according to the Times, the documentary's narrator opines that some of these states are forward positions for the West to contain and meddle in Russia. And the documentary underscores a decades-long obsession of the Chinese Communist Party, the fall of the Soviet Union. As the China scholar David Shambaugh once told the Wall Street Journal, when the leadership gets up in the morning and goes to bed at night, it is the Soviet collapse that haunts them. That's because, as we're too apt to forget, the People's Republic of China is in its political system modeled on the USSR. Since 1991, the Chinese Communist Party has produced thousands of papers and roundtable discussions on the fall of the Soviet Union. But as James Palmer has written in Foreign Policy, the narrative has shifted in recent years away from structural critiques of the Soviet Empire toward a different culprit. The new line of argument in the party is that Soviet leaders like Mikhail Gorbachev and Nikita Khrushchev simply lost their nerve to bolster the strength of the authoritarian system. The critique centers around glasnost, Gorbachev's policy of relaxing authoritarianism and fostering a more open political atmosphere. While the policy from the Western perspective was a moment of triumph, for the Chinese, it was a fatal mistake. And the main point of Gorbachev's failure was his relaxation of the state's grip on information, according to the Chinese narrative. Under Gorbachev, banned books returned to shelves, people living in the Soviet Union learned the truth about Stalin's purges, and criticism of the government was allowed. The Chinese Communist Party sees this as the detrimental effect of opening up to the West, which, according to Beijing's narrative, uses free flows of information to destabilize mighty communist regimes. And it's not just the new documentary. As the Times reports, Chinese universities are organizing lectures tying the war in Ukraine to Russia's grievances with the West, such as NATO expansion. This narrative justifies Russia's invasion as essentially provoked by the West. So perhaps China's posture on Ukraine has less to do with its undying support for Russia and more with making common cause with Moscow to break the West's hegemony on information and thus shield the Communist Party from critiques, attacks, and negative information. For President Xi, the main goal remains what it has always been, keeping the Communist Party of China firmly in power. Thanks to all of you for being part of my program this week. I will see you next week.
Hey, happy Easter and Passover to you and yours. I'm Brian Stelter, and this is Reliable Sources, where we examine the story behind the story and we figure out what's reliable. This hour, an interview that took my breath away. American journalist Danny Fenster, who spent 6 months in a Myanmar prison, now speaking out, revealing what kept him going all that time. Plus, a whole new meaning to the term tweet storm, what to expect from Elon Musk this week as he tweets his way through a hostile takeover of Twitter. And later, political fear factor. Why are Republicans breaking away from the bipartisan presidential debate commission? We haven't even made it to the midterms yet. We're going to get into all that and more. But first, there are big holes in the story about the Moskva, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet, a warship that now rests at the bottom of the sea. It's described as the biggest wartime loss of a naval ship in 40 years. But there's very little vetted information about what happened. There were no reporters, no witnesses when the ship began to sink. So what we're left with are dueling storylines, with Ukraine claiming to have hit it with anti-ship missiles and Russia trying to say otherwise, claiming a fire broke out on board the warship. That's what caused ammunition to explode. That's what damaged the vessel and forced the crew to evacuate. A more complicated story, right? There's no way for news outlets to truly get to the bottom of it. But consider this. The normal crew on the Moskva would have been about 500 sailors. 500. We don't know whether the entire crew was on board when the ship began to sink. But we do know that in a free society, family members and neighbors and lawmakers would be demanding answers from the government. Then again, we also know Russia is not a free society. Even asking questions about this could raise red flags in Moscow. Now, Russia's Ministry of Defense did put out some video on Saturday. Here it is, showing dozens of sailors, allegedly those who escaped from the Moskva. The number of sailors in this formation is unclear, but it's not 500. And they look remarkably fresh-faced for a group that's just endured a harrowing rescue at sea. Skepticism must be applied very liberally to this. Now, at least one crew member was reported killed and has been publicly mourned on a Russian social networking site. A widow posted that her husband, quote, fought to his last breath for the life of the ship. So we know that from a stray social media post. How many more were like him? How many others? In war, so many of the dead are not even counted. In Ukraine right now, their stories never even told. Will we ever know the full story of the Moskva? Or will it be warped by propaganda and the truth never revealed? Joining me now for more on that, Masha Gessen, staff writer at The New Yorker and author of The Future is History, How Totalitarianism Reclaimed Russia, also the author of Surviving Autocracy, one of the foremost experts about Russia. Masha, welcome to Reliable Sources. Thank you for coming on the program. I think we need to unpack some of the information wars with regards to this warship, because I'm seeing contradictory messages from Russian state media. On the one hand, this ship was not attacked by Ukraine. There was a fire, they claim, and that's what went wrong. On the other hand, you have pundits on Russian state TV saying, bomb Kyiv, this is war, we need to retaliate for the sinking of our ship. Can both those messages be true? Do they make sense together?
Okay, Brian, what we're doing right now is exactly what Russian propagandists want us to do, right? Which is amplifying ridiculous messages. Do you not have sound?
Tell me more.
Everything that we hear from Russian official sources, everything that is on Russian TV is a lie, right? This has been documented over and over again. I really don't see why we would go on, the broadly watched CNN program and trying to engage with these lies. That is, we know that these are propaganda messages, right? The only legitimate way to look at the Moskva is to say, okay, here's what is known, and here's what we don't know, right? Anything that comes from the Russian propaganda machine is a priori unreliable, and engaging with it is irresponsible.
I think that's really, really interesting. And it's exactly what newsrooms are wrestling with, including the CNNs of the world, where, think about journalism school 101, right, Masha? You're taught to just present both sides, ask for comment, try to be very careful not to jump to conclusions. And yet in this particular situation, in a 21st century information war, where propaganda seems to win the day, Some of those journalism 101 rules may have to be revisited. What would you say?
I would say that those are not journalism 101 rules. I think journalism 101 rules are to begin with evaluating your sources, and you don't go back over and over again to somebody who has been lying to you. That is classic both-sidism and classic false equivalency. There is no equivalence between the Ukrainian information sources and Russian information sources. Ukrainian information sources, by and large, in the more than 50 days of this war, have proven to be largely reliable. Russian information sources, over more than 50 days of this war and preceding it, have proven to be profoundly, consistently false. Setting them side by side is completely irresponsible. This is not journalism 101. It's the exact opposite of it.
The opposite. So tell us more about your impressions of the media coverage of this war, more than 50 days in now. Are you seeing too much of a horse race mentality in the coverage?
Yes, I am. Glad you asked. There's so few ways that we have of telling ongoing stories, and one of them very consistently is the way that we cover, football games, right? And I'm really noticing a lot of that going on with coverage of the war in Ukraine, especially by news organizations that have to do stories day in and day out, right? Where they go, oh, this is a loss for Russia, or Russia, Russia is doing blank, but this means it's going to, it's suffering setbacks, right? This is how Russia is advancing on Mariupol, right? That's not what war is about. Yes, this is what war is about if you are listening to military strategists. But I think our job as journalists is to listen to people on the ground. That's the one thing that we can do that our readers and our viewers can't do, which is actually talk to people who are there, right? And not just to listen to official sources who will tell you about advancing troops or retreating troops. And when you listen to people on the ground, what you hear is death, destruction, cruelty, but also mutual aid, right? Whatever these human stories are. Right? And I think that, when the headlines turn to advance, retreat, took this city, controlled this airspace, it really becomes too much like scorekeeping, and that is terrifying and dehumanizing.
It is dehumanizing. So important to hear from people on the ground. Are you finding that's getting harder and harder as the weeks go on inside Russia? You have so many contacts, so many friends, some of whom had to flee Moscow and other parts of Russia. But the banner on screen now says dearth of reliable information coming from Russia. If anything, that's an understatement. I get more worried every week about how little we know inside Russia right now. And so what's it been like for you?
Right. It's very hard to get what's going on inside Russia. In the first week of the war, basically all of the Russian independent media, and there weren't many to begin with, but there were a handful, they were forced to shut down. Their journalists were forced to flee, and their websites were blocked to Russians. So for Russians who want to get reliable information, follow Telegram channels for independent media. They use VPNs to try to get around the blocking. Right? That's hard. That's time consuming. That requires at least some technological savvy, and I think people get tired of it over time and kind of try to correct for the lies that they're listening to or they're seeing on official media. It's really extraordinary. I actually spent last night watching official TV to try to get a handle on what's going on there, and it is every single story is the opposite of truth, right? They tell things, they take things that would be true about Russians and they tell these same stories about Ukrainians. But no matter how much you realize that that is a lie, it starts to seep into you after about an hour of it. Your reality, your hold in reality begins to slip. And living in that environment 24 hours a day with less and less information coming in from the outside, less and less information that is actually factually based, your grip on reality starts to slip.
It's a scary, ongoing situation. It's something that's becoming a bigger issue as the weeks and the months grind on. Masha, thank you. I think this was a great Journalism 101 course. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Brad.
Let's stay on this theme now about Russian propaganda. Russian speakers in one of Russia's eastern neighbors, Estonia, have long been hooked on the programming coming out of Russian state TV. But since the start of the war, they've been partly cut off from that programming. With more on this, Scott McLean, he's live in Tallinn, Estonia. That's the capital. Scott, tell us more about why you're in Estonia and what you're learning there.
Hey, Brian, yeah, Estonia has taken in a heck of a lot of Ukrainian refugees, 30,000 of them. It may sound like a small number, but this is a country of 1.3 million only, and so that's more than 2% of the population now is a Ukrainian refugee. And you can understand why Estonians feel so passionate about helping Ukraine. They have a lot in common. They are both formerly part of the Soviet Union. They both have very large Russian-speaking populations, and they have both lived for the last few decades with the constant fear and threat of Russian aggression. As you mentioned, Estonia has also gotten used to Russian propaganda beaming into living rooms across the country. It is trying to change that, but in practice, it is tougher than it looks.
In eastern Estonia, the vast birch forests and open plains dotted with industry and concrete apartment blocks can feel a lot like Russia. Most people are ethnically Russian, many signs are in Russian, and Russia itself is just across the river. In the Estonian border town of Narva, more than 86% of the population speaks Russian.
Even on this side of the river, native Russian speakers make up a substantial chunk of the Estonian population, one of the many lasting legacies of the Soviet era. Many older people don't speak Estonian well, and in the absence of a whole lot of Russian language media in Estonia, Russian state media has been left to fill the void, giving people a steady dose of Kremlin propaganda.
That is, until the start of the war in Ukraine, when Estonia blocked many Russian news outlets and TV channels, a decision that came with plenty of controversy.
Why I'm not agree? Because I think a great democracy don't can't afraid any propaganda.
Many people here is buying some systems to become the Russian canals. It's not the way. The reality. Restrict is not the way.
Antennas are suddenly a popular item at electronics stores for Russian speakers to easily pick up Russian TV channels. Others watch online through VPNs. Ilya Fedorov and his father Oleg have an even better setup in their home right across the river from Russia.
Basically, this is just the lineup of the channels people usually get in their Russian households as well.
They've got this TV hooked up to a Russian satellite dish, another to an antenna, both picking up all the Russian channels, though some they'd rather not watch.
I can only watch 10-15 seconds maximum because the levels of aggression and paranoia and lies, just blatant lies, it's crazy.
A lot of people here are still very connected to Russia. Do you think that they believe everything that the Kremlin is saying about the war in Ukraine?
I don't just think. I know there are a lot of people who think Russian state media is the truth. But for sure, it's a lot of false news and lies, and only a minority in Narva don't believe Russian propaganda.
Some of those true believers are reluctantly tuning into this channel. ETV Plus was launched in 2015 to give Russian-speaking Estonians access to reliable news about their own country and the world.
We don't have propaganda. We can make news about corrupted ministers or presidents in our country or politics. Many Russian journalists can do it.
On Friday, ETV Plus reported on the sinking of Russia's flagship, the Moskva, giving both Ukraine's claim that its missile sunk the ship and the more benign Russian version that it sank after a fire. Since the channel's launch, ETV Plus's ratings have made gains, but gaining trust is much tougher.
Many of our viewers are ready to blame us, are ready to judge us because they don't believe us. But we are ready to speak with them. I don't want to judge them. I am ready to wait. I am ready to give those people a time to make them believe me.
Now, Margarita Tanaeva, the anchor there, says that covering war is especially difficult because she has to be especially diligent with the detail. Any mistake is likely to be held up by her many skeptics and especially the new viewers of ETV Plus who've come over from watching Russian state media as evidence that ETV Plus is Western propaganda or that it's unreliable. Now, both Tanaeva and the Narwa City Council chairman that you heard from earlier in the story, Brian, they don't think that these channels are going to get unblocked anytime soon, not until at least they change fundamentally, and that would take, they think, a change in the Russian government. I should also point out as well that there is somewhat of a generational divide here. Those older Russian-speaking citizens who don't speak Estonian well, some of them aren't even Estonian citizens, they're much more likely to believe the Kremlin line. Younger people, of course, are much more likely to be reading English sources, Estonian sources, and have a much wider worldview. Estonia, though, also still has this problem with integrating its Russian-speaking minority. Even today, you can go through the public school system and come out of it and you'll speak Estonian, but sometimes not all that well, because if you live in one of these Russian-speaking areas, you won't have a lot of places to practice. And so Estonia is going to have these Russian-speaking bubbles for a long time. They just want to make sure that they're not Russian Kremlin propaganda bubbles. Brian?
Scott, thanks so much. We learned a lot from that. Thank you again. We'll break in at any time if there are alerts from the war zone, from Ukraine and Russia. We'll bring you the latest. Also coming up here, Musk CTV, a media frenzy over Elon Musk's bid to take over Twitter. But is it all just an elaborate trolling move? Two top reporters on the beat are standing by. And what about this? Is this a story about trolling to Biden's press secretary with some sharp words about Fox's White House reporter? Is Twitter biased against conservatives? That's the title of this new working paper by professors at MIT and Yale. In the words of Professor David Rand, the root of the challenge when looking at this is that Republicans, conservatives, are substantially more likely to share misinformation or fake news than Democrats are. Thus, as social media's platforms, the policies aimed at reducing nonsense and boosting real news would ensnare Republican users more often. This research team found wide bipartisan support for platforms trying to reduce misinformation. People don't want QAnon craziness all up in their news feeds. But, Professor Rand says, putting these two observations together shows the problem. In responding to bipartisan demand, platforms may wind up enforcing on conservatives more than on liberals. Now, complaints about conservatives being censored online, they are core to the GOP's identity. See this Heritage headline as an example. It plays right into the cancel culture narrative. It powers Trumpian fundraising efforts, and now it is at the heart of Elon Musk's hostile takeover bid for Twitter. Right-wing media is celebrating Musk's bid, saying he's going to rescue free speech. He's going to reinstate it for millions of Americans and people around the world who've been muzzled by Twitter. And the villain in their story is, of course, the mainstream media. Musk is getting a lot of criticism, a lot of skepticism. But what about the foundational claims here? Let's dig into it with Jessica Tunkel, a senior reporter at The Information, covering media and telecom, and Claire Duffy, tech reporter for CNN Business, covering the business of tech and the strategies of these companies. Welcome to you both. Claire, it is Sunday morning. We are awaiting the next move by the Twitter board. They have announced a poison pill provision that might make it harder for Musk to take over Twitter. What's going on now? Is this all about to become a big negotiation between Musk and the Twitter board?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. You know, I think that a lot of tech reporters have spent their weekends refreshing Elon Musk's Twitter feed to see what he'll say about this latest defensive move by the Twitter board. You know, basically what this does is if Elon continues to try to grow his stake in Twitter, it will become much more expensive, much more difficult for him to acquire the whole company. It gives the board a little bit more time, a little bit more power in this situation back, and potentially gives them more opportunity to negotiate with other potential buyers. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see what happens in this next week, whether Elon will make some comments about continuing to try to buy up shares despite this poison pill, whether we'll hear more about other potential bidders for Twitter. I think there are maybe more options on the table now that the board has taken this defensive measure that gives them a bit more time, a bit more space to consider their options.
Right, and maybe find other bidders and figure out what to do. Jessica, speaking of Elon Musk's Twitter feed, he is replying to folks online, and he replied to a user who said, this is going to be rigged. If Musk can't buy Twitter, this just proves the game is rigged, and it proves how deep the corruption goes. Very much a conservative conspiracy theory behind that tweet. But he is suggesting this is rigged if he's not allowed to take over Twitter. Can we unpack that for a second? Is that true?
I mean, I think Elon is obviously playing to his base, right? He is playing to the people who see him as the liberator of the platform and giving the platform back to the people. You know, that is one camp that is viewing him. And then the other camp views him as an egomaniac that wants to buy Twitter to be a megaphone for him. Kind of, I think about it in the same fashion where you see billionaires buying newspapers, right? To control the public perception of them. Both these things can be true, right? I think that to your point about is he just trolling right now, or does he really want to buy the platform? I think that's what the board is trying to figure out right now.
Right, it's amazing that we're in a situation where he's made this bid and we don't know how serious he is. Jessica, where do you come down on this free speech conversation? It's obviously incredibly complicated. We could spend hours talking about it. When you're suspended or banned by a social network, that is a very intense thing and not to be taken lightly. But this cry that it's all about Republicans being censored, do you buy into that?
Look, I think that his push about free speech and that he's going to like open it up to everyone. I mean, despite all the rhetoric, like he can't do that, right? That's not realistic. We are going into midterm elections. Right. All the tech executives we talk to say they are expecting much more pressure going forward, more than what we've seen already, which is quite a bit. And so how much he'll actually be able to do, it really remains to be seen.
Yeah, it definitely does. I think if he actually became the head of Twitter, he'd realize how complicated it is. Local laws, regulations, also what users want. Most users don't want to live in a sewer on their phones full of bulls. You know, they don't want that. They actually want some moderation. But look, we can go on and on. Here's the counter question for you, Claire. Is Elon Musk exactly what Twitter needs? Tell us, what's the pro-Musk argument for like coming in and blowing up Twitter?
You know, I think Twitter has had this problem in the last couple of years. Their share price has sort of flattened out. They're having trouble attracting users. And so some people could say, you know, Elon clearly understands this platform really well. He has built this massive audience. He has more than 80 million followers. He knows how to go viral. He has this deep understanding of how the platform works and how to attract attention on it. And so, you know, I think the argument on that side could be, you know, hey, look, maybe Elon will find a way to attract more users. He's also talked about the fact that for him, this isn't a money play. This is, you know, something that he feels is really morally important. And so, you know, maybe this is a way for Twitter to be focused less on attracting advertisers, which is something that has sort of driven their desire to moderate the platform, because advertisers don't want their content next to angry harassment or misinformation. And so, you know, maybe this for him will accomplish that.
Maybe it will. Claire and Jessica, thank you both. We're going to keep covering this every day on Reliable Sources Daily. That's our CNN Plus program at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Sign up for CNN Plus for that. Up here on the program next, we are going to have an incredibly emotional interview with Danny Fenster. He's the American journalist who was behind bars in Myanmar for 6 months. Hear how his wife and a pad of paper helped him through it. He's also going to share the link between his ordeal in Myanmar and what's happening now in Russia. And later, how a CNN colleague came to the rescue and gave correspondent Richard Roth a new lease on life. And welcome back to Reliable Sources. I'm Brian Stelter. When the military seized control in Myanmar last year, the resulting violent crackdown led to many reporters being locked up. Danny Fenster was one of them. He was a reporter for Myanmar Now, then managing editor of Frontier Myanmar, and he was targeted by the authorities, picked up at the airport as he was about to fly home to Detroit. He waited and waited behind bars, not knowing how long he would be imprisoned, and his wife Juliana, a Brazilian diplomat, waited with him, staying in the country despite the dangers. She would drop off books and fruit and secret notes for him at the jail. He was there behind bars for almost 6 months. So I sat down with Fenster to hear his story, what it was like when he was finally released, and why he sees connections between his ordeal and now Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Well, so immediately once we heard that the military had seized power in a coup, on February 1st, you kind of wonder. There weren't any explicit threats or anything, but then everyone starts wondering, how is this going to be for journalists? And it slowly started getting worse and worse, but they were largely targeting local reporters. Any escalation for me personally, in terms of worry or fear, there was none until I was at the gate, the boarding gate, and all of a sudden a group of police came in and said they were looking for Daniel Fenster.
So for you, it was a split second, or your entire life changed.
Yeah, basically, and it didn't even set in. That entire day, I didn't think this was going to last very long. And then for another week or two, I didn't think it was going to last very long. There's a real reluctance for me to realize what was happening.
So when did it begin to sink in that this was going to be a long-term ordeal?
Oh, man. Well, it's hard to, I'm trying to write all this down, but it's difficult to piece together the exact timeline. For a while, I had a notebook and a calendar, but at a certain point, they took all that. But within, I think, 3 or 4 weeks, I realized that they were going through with this trial. The legal system is absurd. It's a joke. But they were going to go through this trial, and I was talking to others in prison about the process, and it just drags on for so long. I think by the time I had a court hearing, I realized that this might take, I thought, 2 or 3 months. And I was like, okay, well, I'm going to be here for 2 or 3 months. I'll just kind of accept that. And that's when I kind of thought it'd be long-term. After 2 or 3 months, about the 3-month mark, when I realized there was no progress being made and that it was just a political negotiation, then I thought, wow, I might be here for a year, several years. I'm really not sure. But Juliana was bringing me packages of food and books once every 2 weeks. And she would bring fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, things that were getting me through it. Sometimes a little bit of candy, snacks and things.
I think I would have been fearing for her as well. Fearing that if they can do this to you, they can do this to her too.
Yeah, every time, I was never able to see her, and I wasn't really talking to her when she would arrive at the prison, but every time she'd come to the prison, I was worried that something had happened.
When you're behind bars, when you're in detention, you don't know how long you're going to be in. Do you try to take notes? Do you treat it like a reporting assignment, like the reporting assignment from hell? Or does that part of you go away?
Yeah. No, not at all. It intensifies. It's funny. It's a great question. I've come out of the experience, and I think a lot of people were worried if I'd be traumatized, if, how my mental health was. And I seem to be, doing very well. I think there's a number of reasons for that. But my wife said, I think what happened was you got in there and you immediately thought, okay, I'm a reporter. This is really interesting. Nobody else, no other Western journalists have this view or this experience. And I just went into reporter mode. So there's almost a reason or a meaning to be there. And when the first phone call I had with her and with my parents, I told them, listen, don't worry. It's, I'm doing okay. I said the words, I'm chilling. Don't worry about me. And she said afterwards, when we've been talking about it now, she's like, I think it's because you went into that reporter mode. And I was taking lots of notes and writing down a lot of things and sketching things. And that added, I think, to the sense of like, okay, that something decent will come out of this. And then I got caught maybe 3 months into it, trying to sneak notes out to Juliana. And when they found me sneaking notes out, then they really cracked down. They raided the cell. They took every piece of paper, every pen, and all of a sudden pen and paper became like extreme contraband for this one prisoner. It was like, do not let him touch a pen.
I think that would be the point I would lose hope. Was there a point of that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. It was that. It was terrible. It was awful. And I was thinking I've just gotten in trouble, so they're going to keep me here longer. And I started thinking like, well, if I'm going to stay here, let's say I'm going to stay here for 3 years. If I'm going to stay here for 3 years, I need to negotiate with them to have a notebook. We can keep it at the ward superintendent guy's office. Let's just leave it there. And when I want to write something, I'll go there. They can monitor it. They can let me write things down for an hour a day, 2 hours a day. If I can negotiate that, maybe it'll be manageable. But I couldn't. If I had to stay for that much longer without being able to write anything down, I think I would have gone nuts.
When did you start to have a sense that something was happening diplomatically, that there were negotiations, that you might have a chance to get out?
While I was in prison, I had sporadic access to phone calls with the embassy, to my consular representative there, and they were assuring me that they were doing everything they could. And I was talking to my brother, and my brother was telling me all the things that he was trying to do. So I knew there were negotiations going on. I knew that in Myanmar, everything is decided by one person, and that it's going to be up to him, and that people are lobbying and negotiating with him. But I didn't know any of the details of what was happening.
This was clearly a sham trial. There's no other way to describe it. And yet there was still hope for you thanks to the diplomatic efforts.
Yeah, it was a sham trial. It's a funny thing. I early on in the trial, I said I had a lawyer. And I said to the lawyer, look, it was kind of understood. They've arrested you. They need to find you guilty so that they can't say that they've wrongly held you this long. They'll find you guilty and then kick you out. And I said to the attorney early on, if that's the case, let's just plead guilty. Let's just plead guilty, and they'll call me guilty, and then they'll send me home. They said, no, there's a phrase in Myanmar, in courts, in the legal system in Myanmar. It's like, we're making a movie. So when you go to court, it's like action. And everyone's playing this part, and it's all show, and everybody knows that. Wow. It's like we have to go through the process. They have to listen to these absurd witnesses, and then they'll find you guilty.
What a terrible position to be in. A sham trial where the defendant is just an actor. Fenster was sentenced to 11 years in prison. But, amazingly, the former U.S. diplomat Bill Richardson was able to secure his release. Fenster is readjusting to normal life now and reconnecting with old colleagues. Recently, he returned to Myanmar's neighboring country of Thailand to start to get back to reporting. But he made one more really important point during our interview. He talked about the global trend against democracy, toward autocracy. And he said that what people have in places like the U.S. is really fragile. Watch this.
No matter where you see signs of progress, at home or out in the world, it's always possible. These things are always somewhat fragile. They can always be taken back, and there can be declines. And I think that's kind of a global trend right now. We're seeing this happen in various places. And I mean, it's not coincidental. These regimes, once Russia invaded Ukraine, both of these countries have a long history of suppressing dissent. So I don't want to overstate this, but as soon as Russia invaded Ukraine, you saw so many similar tactics. In Myanmar, they banned in media the use of the word coup, the use of the word junta. They said, this is a caretaker government, you must call it that. In Russia, they banned the use of the word war and invasion. They've shut down media license. They've revoked media license, shut down newspapers in both countries. They're trying to, impose these bans on the internet.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just remarkably similar to watch it play out. And one thing I think that Western countries make a mistake in is like RT is this sort of, it can be used as this Russian state propaganda. Banning it in European countries in the West, I don't think is the answer. I mean, that stuff is so on its face, obviously unconvincing. Just like in Myanmar, the state media, I don't think anybody really buys into it. Banning it just isn't the right thing to do. So I think that goes both ways. But obviously, it's much more intensive bans in Myanmar and Russia.
Hear the rest of my conversation with Danny on the Reliable Sources podcast. Check that out via Apple or wherever you listen to your pods. All right, coming up, these empty chairs, a symbol of political leaders avoiding hard questions. We have important insight from Lynn Sweet in Washington next. Welcome back live from Philadelphia, where the Founding Fathers were never afraid of tough questions. So let me get this straight. This week, the Republican National Committee called out President Biden, rightly in my view, for not granting many interviews. Biden's only given 2 interviews this year, one to NBC and one to a Substack author. But then the same week, the RNC pulls out of the debates that are always organized, well, they have been for decades, organized by the Bipartisan Commission on Presidential Debates. I don't want to both sides this, but I see problems on both sides. Let's discuss it with Lynn Sweet. She's the Washington bureau chief at the Chicago Sun-Times. Lynn, I think it's a legitimate issue that Biden isn't giving interviews. He takes questions from the press in informal settings, but he's not going on TV. He's not giving interviews to folks like you. That is a real issue. What do you say?
Okay, what I say is, on the first question of Biden, the clear analysis is that his staff feels that the risk doesn't justify what possible reward there could be because of all the issues pointing to why his popularity is waning. It isn't because he doesn't have enough primetime press conferences or even during the day, okay? And we know why, is that he says things that get him in trouble. He needs to, I suppose, have forms to show his humanity, his warmth, his empathy. As a journalist, I say, have him out there. He can handle it because in the end, the more public sees of Biden, he has a chance to get his story out. The people that don't like him, the Republicans who are looking for gaffes, they're out there anyway. The issue you bring up with Trump, with debates, actually is a Trump issue. This is his fingerprints all over it. It's a smokescreen, right? That it's the RNC, Brian. They want to appease, Ronna McDaniel seems to want to appease Trump. What Trump is able to do, he's not even the nominee, but he also wants to insulate himself against having the potential of preparing and dealing in a one-on-one debate with the Democratic nominee. Quick prediction, if Trump isn't the nominee, you may see the RNC change its tune.
Does this relate to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki taking a swipe at Fox's White House reporter Peter Doocy? You know, she was on this liberal podcast the other day, and she made a comment about Fox providing him questions that are stupid questions. She clearly doesn't like Fox's narratives, but Fox is defending Doocy now. Is this related, you think, to the points about Biden and Trump?
Actually, I don't think so. Maybe I have a little different view on it. She got lulled into losing her discipline. This podcast is made by her friends. They go back to the Kerry campaign. They worked in the Obama White House. She was forgetting what her real job is, which is to communicate on behalf of the president. Okay, she even repeated some of the swear words that the questioner asked in the question, upping the ante. Now, if you listen to everything she said, however, she also said why she said what you said about taking a swipe about if Peter was given questions. She went on to say, and the whole totality is, I also have a very nice Peter Doocy story where she complimented him on a moment of grace, as she put it. One other quick thing.
That's true.
It's not a negative to consult your colleagues on what question to ask.
Right. Lynn, thank you very much. Great to see you. More on all this in our nightly newsletter at reliablesources.com. Sign up for free right there. And next, the most important story of the day, a story of sacrifice and rebirth on this Easter Sunday. On this day of hope and renewal, a CNN legend is reminding us what family is all about. Richard Roth, senior UN correspondent at CNN. He's been with this network ever since the launch. He's the last remaining CNN original, the last person who's still an employee here 42 years later. And this week, he was given new life thanks to a CNN colleague who answered his call for help. Roth was in desperate need of a kidney, so he turned to his CNN family, emailing the entire company last fall looking for a match. Multiple people stepped up, took the tests, including Samira Jafari, and she was a match. The surgery was on Tuesday, and it was a success. Jafari, the deputy managing editor of CNN's investigations unit, is what Roth calls his heroine. You can see them there on screen together. Jafari took to her Instagram thanking everyone for all the support and saying the true heroes were the members of the Yale transplant team. But I think we all know she was a hero as well. And she wrote this that really struck me today. She said, "The last few years have often left some of us feeling a little helpless. It was nice to just get to fix one thing in the world. I'm grateful for that opportunity now and always. Let's try to fix one thing at a time." Amen. Roth is now out of the hospital. He's resting at home, and he wants you to know there are over 100,000 people waiting for an organ in the U.S. alone. If you can help, try. What a great example of a work family coming together. And by the way, Roth and Jafari are going to be on together on CNN's New Day tomorrow to tell more of this story. Stay tuned now. Jake Tapper's extensive interview with the Ukrainian president is next here on CNN, and we'll see you back here this time next week.
On World Sport today, the quadruple is still on for the Liverpool Football Club. We've got the highlights from their dramatic win against their biggest rivals. 2 red cards in 13 seconds and an overhead kick for an assist. You won't want to miss the latest Serie A drama. And we'll tell you why the Invictus Games have never been more meaningful than they are right now. Hello there and welcome to World Sport. We're coming to you live from CNN Centre. I'm Don Riddell. Manchester City and Liverpool are the best two teams in England this season. They might be the best two in Europe right now, possibly even the world. And currently they just cannot get out of each other's way. Last weekend, you may recall, they played out a thrilling 2-2 draw in a top-of-the-table Premier League clash. And then on Saturday, they met again in the semi-final of the FA Cup at Wembley. And unlike last week, there had to be a winner this time. Liverpool made a lightning-fast start. They love scoring from corners. City could do nothing about Ibrahima Konaté's harrowing header there. And it got much better for Liverpool and much, much worse for City. Shortly afterwards, their goalie somehow allowed Sadio Mane to make it 2-0. And by half-time, it was 3-0, thanks to another goal from Mane, expertly swept in with that volley there. City did pull a couple of goals back after the break, but Liverpool had done enough. A 3-2 win. They are heading to their first FA Cup final under Jurgen Klopp.
City in that second half.
I think, very happy to score the 2 goals for the team. But I think the performance of the team today was fantastic. And I think today, every single player enjoyed really well the game, because I think we do the right thing in the right time, and I think it paid off.
Oh, absolutely proud. It's an incredible. I think the first half was one of the best we ever played. We did all the right stuff. We scored in the right moments. We played an incredible game in the first half, I have to say. I really loved each second of it. We respect the quality of City so much, and it's so difficult to win against them. But because it's these boys in my dressing room, we have a chance.
Despite losing the game, Manchester City still have so much to play for this season. With 7 games remaining, they're leading Liverpool by a point in the Premier League, and they're also in the semi-finals of the Champions League. They're playing Real Madrid next, and the Champions League is the one prize they value above all else. They've never won it before. Liverpool, though, have it all to play for. They've already won the League Cup. They're now 90 minutes away from lifting the FA Cup. If they can overturn City in the league and make it to the Champions League final, where they might run into City again, they could claim an unprecedented quadruple this season. A lot of ifs, buts and maybes in there, but it is still possible. After the match, I caught up with Ian Cheeseman, who covers Man City for Sony Sports India, and I asked him just how Liverpool were able to finally get a win over their biggest rivals.
They did it by starting very quickly against the City team who'd made a number of changes after a very physically and mentally demanding game in midweek in Atletico Madrid, of course, Champions League, where Liverpool, because they had a 3-1 advantage from the first leg at Benfica, had rested 1 or 2 players, rotated the squad a little bit. So it just seemed a little bit fresher, seemed more energetic, seemed more up for it. Pep Guardiola made a number of changes. Can't help thinking that with the injury to Kevin De Bruyne and Kyle Walker, who maybe, who knows, a push could have played today, that he was thinking more in terms of the Premier League title race and the Champions League, which is a sort of golden egg that they're looking for, Manchester City. They've not won it yet. I think the priorities were there, and I think the team selection and the way that the team played today showed that. Now, that's no excuse. Liverpool were excellent and fully deserved their victory. But City weren't at it and they paid the penalty.
Liverpool's final opponents in the FA Cup are being sorted out right now. The second semi-final at Wembley kicked off just over half an hour ago. It is still goalless between Chelsea and Crystal Palace. We already know the lineup for the final of the Women's FA Cup. The current WSL leaders and current FA Cup holders, Chelsea, will be defending their trophy thanks to a couple of world-class goals in the second half of their match against Arsenal. The Blues' Norwegian international Guro Reiten opening the scoring with that long-range effort just after the break. And then 11 minutes later, Soo Yeon-ji making some space for herself and smashing it in past the goalie. 2-0 the final score in that. So Chelsea will face Manchester City in the final, and these teams are no strangers to this occasion between them. They've won the last 5 titles, but this will be the first time that they have played each other in the final. Mark your calendars, it's all set for May the 15th at Wembley. The title race in Italy's Serie A this season is turning into a bit of a nail-biter, and on Saturday we saw a highly entertaining game between Juventus and Bologna in Turin. Anybody who left this one a few minutes early to beat the traffic home will have missed all the fun. Bologna got in front early in the second half when Marko Arnautovic rounded the goalie to score, and that lead stood until the game was deep into stoppage time. The reason there was so much added time was because the ref had his hands full with this. First, Adama. Juventus really punished them for it in the 95th minute. A couple of headers led to an overhead kick from Alvaro Morata, headed in by Dusan Vlahovic. What a finish. 1-1, the final score. The top of the table now looks like this in Italy. Milan lead Inter by 2 points, but Inter have a game in hand. If Napoli win their game in hand on Monday, then they would be just 2 points behind the current leaders. With 5 games to play, Juventus now likely have a bit too much to do. They are 8 points off the pace. Still to come on World Sport, the Golden State Warriors are back in the NBA playoffs. They've still got the old stars, but the cast has been expanded with some very exciting new talent. Hey, welcome back. Remember that time when the Golden State Warriors just seemed to be winning everything in basketball? Wasn't that long ago, but it seems like it because then they went completely off the boil and stopped even making it to the postseason. Now they're back though, and they're full of surprises. Our Koi Wire has the latest on the opening weekend in the NBA playoffs.
It's a scary sight, Don. That's what Warriors star Klay Thompson said afterwards as he, Draymond Green, and Steph Curry, the two-time MVP, were back in the playoffs for the first time in 3 years. Curry back 1 month to the day since injuring his foot, but last night wasn't just about the Splash Brothers, it was about the whole Poole. Jordan Poole making his playoff debut, looking like a young Chef Curry cooking out there. 5 3-pointers, a game-high 30 points. This squad is looking scary. Maybe a revival of the Golden State dynasty. Steph Curry got to splash in the pool party a little bit, just 22 minutes, but he still dropped 16 points, Don. Warriors dominate Denver in Game 1, 123-107. Young Poole said he's shining out there because the old vets are lifting him up.
There's no better feeling than having the guys behind you who've already been through the fight. They've been through it at the highest level. And, you know, knowing that if you make any mistakes, you got those guys there to pick you up. And then, you know, there's no better feeling than that. So I'm just, thankful to be out there on the court with those guys and trying to learn as much as possible.
There's a youth movement happening in the postseason this year, Don. Minnesota's 20-year-old guard Anthony Edwards making his playoff debut in a clash with Memphis's John Morant. But last season's top pick, Edwards, showing that he means business. The human highlight reel, Morant going for one of his signature dunks, but runs into the heavy hand of denial, getting hurled to the floor. The third-year star Morant's okay. Edwards is built like a linebacker, isn't he? Scoring like a quarterback, though. Game-high 36 points for Edwards. Morant still scores 32 in the matchup between two of the league's brightest young stars, but Game 1, advantage Edwards and the Timberwolves, winning 130-117. Philadelphia's Tyrese Maxey, also the first playoff start of his career, coming off the bench last postseason, and the second-year 76er has a monster third quarter. Maxey takes an incredible half-court bounce pass from James Harden, finishing with a nice reverse layup, and then he says, I'm just going to take this one myself. Driving to the rack, getting the bucket and the foul. Now he's feeding off the crowd. Maxey finishing the quarter from way downtown for 3 of his 21 points in the third quarter alone. He finishes with 38 on the night as Philly goes Rocky Balboa on the Raptors, beating them by 20 points. And the Dallas Mavericks without Serbian superstar Luka Doncic means trouble. Losing record without him this season, and he's out for the playoff opener against the Jazz with a strained calf. Mavs don't have an answer for Donovan Mitchell in this one. He scores 30 of his 32 points in the second half, Don, to give Utah the 1-zip series lead. 4 more games on Sunday, Don. That includes Giannis, the Greek Freak, and the defending champion Milwaukee Bucks starting their title defense against the Chicago Bulls.
Forward to that, Coy, thanks very much. Okay, the 6th Invictus Games got underway in The Hague this weekend, and arguably this event has never been more meaningful. Founded by Prince Harry back in 2014, it's an international sporting event for wounded, injured and sick servicemen and women. And these games are being held, of course, just 2 months after Russia commenced its brutal invasion of Ukraine. At the opening ceremony on Saturday, both Prince Harry and his wife Meghan spoke, and they praised the bravery of the Ukrainian delegation who'd made the difficult decision to come and compete in the Games.
For each team, my husband and I both recognize it's been a lot to get here, both physically and emotionally, not least of which for the Ukraine team, whom we are all standing with. Oksana team, we talked about it yesterday. Slava Ukraini.
Your bravery in choosing to come and for being here tonight cannot be overstated. You told me yesterday when you decided to join us despite all odds, you said you came to be on this global stage not simply to show your strength, but to tell your truth, the truth of what is happening in your country. You know we stand with you. The world is united with you, and still you deserve more. And my hope is that these events, this event, creates the opportunity and how we as a global community can better show up for you. So, Invictus, are you ready? No. Invictus, are you ready? That's better.
You know, Ukrainian athletes have also been competing this weekend and showing an awful lot of character amidst what are very difficult circumstances. These tennis players gave it everything against the US, but winning wasn't necessarily the most important thing. That's next.
It's just super nice to be in a safe place here and to play in that amazing crowd with a great support. It's nice to see the Ukrainian flags everywhere.
Welcome back. The Greek tennis star Stefanos Tsitsipas has just joined a pretty elite club. He's only the sixth man in the Open era to win back-to-back titles in Monte Carlo. The likes of Bjorn Borg and Rafa Nadal have done it before. Tsitsipas faced an unlikely opponent, the world number 46 from Spain, Alejandro Davidovich Fokina, who had knocked out the world number 1 Novak Djokovic in the second round. But this was a bridge too far for Fokina. Tsitsipas prevailed in straight sets, winning 6-3, 7-6, and afterwards it was revealed that these two had actually played each other before, even though one of them had forgotten all about it.
I've seen you for many years now. I don't know if we played juniors. I think we played juniors together. In Banfili. I completely forgot.
Yeah, you beat me 6-1, 6-0.
Really? That's probably why.
And meanwhile, the qualifiers for the inaugural Billie Jean King Cup have been played this week, and it was an emotional affair in North Carolina where the American team was playing host to Ukraine. Before the action, some of the Ukraine players told CNN about their personal heartbreak, and they struggled in the first two matches on Friday. However, they showed incredible fighting spirit, having lost those two matches initially. Ukraine then pulled off two major upsets to stay alive in the tie. First, the world number 93, Diana Yastremska, beat the 14th ranked Jessica Pegula, and then an even bigger shock in match 4 when Katerina Zavatska, who's ranked outside the top 200, beat Shelby Rogers. The match was being played in America, but there was a lot of Ukrainian support, and it all went down to the decisive doubles match, which the US team of Pegula and Asia Mohammed edged in straight sets. Ukraine's players were philosophical in defeat, though. They might have lost the match, but the important thing is that they're safe.
You know, I always been proud of my country, and I always been proud that I'm Ukrainian, and I always like to represent my country. But now, at this moment, it's well, it's tough to describe it. But you know, my heart stays at home, and I really want to go back there. But my mind is here, and I have to play, and I have a responsibility on my sister, and it's just super nice to be in a safe place here and to play in that amazing crowd with a great support. It's nice to see the Ukrainian flags everywhere.
Now then, usually by this time in mid-April, Bayern Munich are miles ahead of the competition in Germany for another Bundesliga title. Bayern have won 9 of them in a row, but after Dortmund's 6-1 thrashing of Wolfsburg on Saturday, the gap was cut to just 6 points, perhaps giving Bayern something to think about ahead of their trip to Arminia Bielefeld on Sunday. But they didn't have too much to worry about, leading through an own goal against one of the worst teams in the league before Serge Gnabry and then Jamal Musiala eased Bayern to a comfortable 3-0 win. It means that their lead is now back up to 9 points, and surely a 10th straight title is just around the corner. There are only 4 games left to play, and they could clinch it as soon as next week, because Bayern hosts second-place Borussia Dortmund on Saturday. Of course, if Bayern win, it's all over. Still ahead on World Sport, we will round up all of the latest golf action, and on the LPGA Tour in Hawaii, there's a lot more swing than just the swing of a club.
Well, she got on the dance.
We're back with the LPGA Tour's Lotte Championship, which crowned its winner on Saturday in Hawaii. Hinako Shibuno was seeking a first tour win since that surprising Women's Open Championship back in 2019. The Japanese star shot a bogey-free round of 70, but fell 2 strokes short. Yuju Kim bogeyed the 17th to give Shibuno a bit of hope, but a superb chip at the 18th set up a birdie with which she clinched her 5th career win on tour. Now then, one of the quirkiest traditions on this tour, the winner is asked to perform the hula dance. A little out of Kim's comfort zone perhaps, but let's give her an A for effort. Mahalo. Should be an exciting final round at the RBC Heritage Tournament in Hilton Head. Harold Varner III is the man to beat after a blistering 8 under par round of 63 on Saturday. The American is a stroke clear of a chasing pack that includes the South African Erik van Rooyen. The man with the unmistakable handlebar moustache signed for a 3rd round score of 67. Shane Lowry and Patrick Cantlay are also just a stroke behind the leader. Van Rooyen is the latest in a long line of South African golfers to shine on the world stage, but at the age of 32, he's taken his time to break into the big time. His first PGA Tour win came just last year at the Barracuda Championship. CNN's sister show, Living Golf, has been to South Africa to see where the motivation and inspiration for them all comes from, starting with the 2008 Masters tournament when Trevor Immelman donned the green jacket.
Those guys, after I won in 2008, they're 4 or 5 years younger than me. Absolutely, they were thinking the same thing. Hey, if Trevor can do this, I've played with him. I know that I can play with him. I've seen what he can do. Why can't I do this? I just need to believe in myself. Yeah. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff you draw on as an athlete. You need to find little edges that you can build your self-confidence with when you're isolated and on your own out there competing.
Among those rising stars, 32-year-old PGA Tour winner Erik van Rooyen.
Now I've had the chance to play with Ernie. I've gotten to know Trevor really well, especially with him being the President's Cup captain this year. Yeah, it really puts a smile to my face knowing that I saw those guys on TV and now I'm sort of friends with them and playing with them. So it's an absolute honor.
While Van Rooyen played most of his amateur golf in the US for the University of Minnesota, coming home to play on the Sunshine Tour was what ultimately sharpened his game.
It's an extremely competitive tour, so that's one of the reasons why I sort of went back there. You know, I knew it was going to be tough to compete, and that's really what you want to help push you to get to the next level. So, you know, I spent 4 years away from home. My dad kind of urged me to go back. I really wanted to stay. I thought I was ready to play PGA Tour, but looking back, I wasn't ready, and I needed to go a different route. And going back to the Sunshine Tour, that was the best decision for me. Like I said, there's a lot of good players. I think there's a lot of players that never truly reach their full potential because they don't maybe go play overseas. But it's a fantastic tour to start on, to learn how to be a pro golfer and eventually use that as a stepping stone to get to the next level.
For both Van Rooyen and Immelman, it's clear they believe, given the right access and nurturing, the sport can only grow across the continent.
And Africa as a continent, it's so vast. You know, in some ways it's an untapped resource. Do you see green shoots in other countries within the continent?
Yeah, I sure do, and I'm excited about it. Look, for the most part, over the years, it's been South Africa and Zimbabwe that have flown the flag for Africa from a golf standpoint. But yeah, as the game starts to become more accessible in the rest of Africa, we've seen in all other sports the amount of natural talent that comes from that continent. There's no doubt in my mind, as we'll be able to start to roll out the access to people all over, we're going to have more and more great golfers coming from Africa.
I think we have a long way to go to get to a place where we can all be like, okay, we've now opened the doors of golf to a broader audience. I think we're on the right track.
All right, and that does it for this edition of World Sport. Thanks so much for your company. I'm Don Riddell at CNN Centre. Take care and I'll see you again soon.
Along the coastline of southeastern Africa, something beautiful, something special is happening. A rebirth of the Afro surf scene.
This is growing. Surfing community is strong and there's a voice.
Amplifying the continent's deep undercurrents of surfing.
That's what this Afro surf thing is to me. It's hopefully a Trojan horse that gets people interested not only in the continent, but in the richness of its people and what it has to offer to the world.
This is not Australia or Hawaii. This is Mozambique. And this is Inside Africa. Blue, pristine, warm ocean waters, a hallmark of the coastline along Mozambique. And in the waters off the town of Tofu, chances are you'll see a whale shark too. An experience that attracts ocean lovers and divers from all over the world.
Tofu always has been special. It's a very small town, but always had something special. It was always my favorite place. You get, how do you say it, hooked when you come here, like, I want to stay here.
In recent years, this small fishing village has gained a reputation for another reason, as a sweet spot for surfing. One of the best in Mozambique.
We have a beautiful wave here, and it's a nice lineup.
Bruno Lopez is talking about a barreling right-handed break that is fast becoming a favorite among experienced surfers.
It's like very, very good feeling. You need to come and taste that.
Lopez is a geomatic engineer by trade, but he's also a surfer, and he's been coming to Tofu since he was a child.
We used to camp here. I come here with my parents, and then after 18, starting to come with my friends to party, and also to start when I was starting surfing.
Now in his mid-40s and a Tofu resident, Lopez says he's witnessed an incredible transformation in the town. A burgeoning Mozambican surf culture.
25 years when I came here, most of the person that will be at the beach to surf were foreigners, tourists, and were maximum 2, 3. Maybe 10 years ago, I came here and I saw 2 or 3 Mozambican guys surfing, and I was amazed. I was like, wow, what's going on here? I'm not going to say that it's already settled. This is growing, but I feel like surfing community is strong, and there's a voice. We have a voice, they have a voice.
I want to put Mozambique on the map because, first of all, Mozambique has incredible waves. And I don't think that Mozambique has been represented in terms of surf. And so, you know, I'm very lucky and blessed to be that first person to put Mozambique out there.
Part of the renaissance can no doubt be credited to some hometown surfers, like Sang-Min Cho, known locally as Minnie, getting more and more recognition on the global surf scene.
I think in the last 3 years, we've seen a lot more in terms of Mozambican surfing, but I remember when I started surfing, there was no support, there was no sponsorship, because like a Mozambican surfing, like professionally, was unheard of. And so the new wave of African culture is surf, I think, you know.
Minnie is Mozambique's first ever professional surfer. The 22-year-old is ripping his way onto the World Surfing League qualifying series, earning international sponsorships.
Surfing has been the best thing that's happened to my life, for sure. I've been able to you know, have a job, travel the world, and represent my country. It was always a dream of mine to represent my country in some way.
Born in Mozambique to a Korean father and a Mozambican mother, Mini started surfing at the age of 14 as a way to clear his head.
I had a lot of difficulties growing up at a young age, so surfing to me was an escape. To me, it's mind-blowing that us surfers are people riding the energy of the ocean, you know. I think there's a big potential for a lot of Mozambican kids to make it big in the world in terms of surf.
Mini's vision and success are just part of what's driving the rebirth of an Afro surf culture in Mozambique.
Mini is a reference. His brother Junior is a reference. Armando is a reference. These kids are amazing. How exciting is being part of this continent at this moment. People have a voice, and that's why I think surf community becoming strong in small communities like this, I love what is happening.
And lining up to ride that wave is the next generation of up-and-coming surfers in Mozambique. There's a rising surf scene in Mozambique.
I think surfing in Dof especially is pretty much the hub of surfing in Mozambique, because in other places you don't have as many local surfers, you don't have as many surf schools and surf programs in such a small village.
Mini Cho is the country's first professional surfer, and he's determined to grow the next generation of competitive surfers.
We're only beginning, but hopefully we have a lot more kids who are surfing better, and then maybe 2024 we'll have an Olympic team and we'll have some Mozambican kids representing Mozambique in the Olympics, and so that's a goal of mine.
To that end, Mini is pouring his energy into the Tofu Surf Club, which introduces kids to the sport.
Definitely I've seen less kids in the streets, more kids in the water. We've seen a boom in Mozambican kids surfing. Tofu Surf Club has helped create a new wave of Mozambican surfers. A lot of kids surf here, but they're not as committed. Armando's probably the only surfer in the water that's going to be in the water before me. Because I used to be always the one who would be there at like 4:30 in the morning, and nowadays Armando's in the water before I am. He's very dedicated and he's pushing it.
I love surfing because it's so fun, and when I'm in a wave I feel like I forget all of my problems. All I do like all day, I just in the wave and having a lot of fun, smiling.
17-year-old Armando is in the lineup of next generation surfers in Tofu, waiting to catch the next big wave.
I started surf 2012, and I was not surfing every day because I was going to school also. But from 2014, I started to surf every day. Like the ocean just called me, Amanda, just come to have fun here. And if I don't surf, I don't feel good. Narciso is my mentor. He's been explaining me a lot about surfing.
Narciso Namposa is a name you will hear a lot around Tofu. Before the kids here learn to surf, they have to learn how to swim. Narciso, a lifeguard and swim teacher, is known to use swim lessons to impart life lessons.
He's been teaching me like be a good guy, keep surfing, and yeah, he's been like my coach and explain me about the life. Keep surfing, and yeah, it's gonna change your life.
Armando is one of the Nemos. I teach him how to swim. Now he's just ripping surfing. And I'm so proud of it.
For Narciso, just as important as growing the next generation of competitive surfers in Tofu is grooming guardians of the sea.
They have to build a patience with the sea first, and then they have to take care of it. The one thing I think that is the best is to teach them how to be safe in the water, take them snorkeling, then they will take care of the rubbish, collecting rubbish. So it's one of my thing that I'm proud of it, to teach kids how to swim and how to take care of it, and to understand what's the value of the sea.
Surf teach me a lot of things, to look after my beach and to take care also of tofu and tofinho.
With the surf culture in Mozambique, Minnie says, comes character building.
And this is something that I also pass on to the kids. When you fall, you gotta stand back up and try again. And it's the same things that we teach the kids in surfing, you know? When you fall, you're not gonna be like, no, I'm out, I'm done, I don't wanna surf anymore. No, you wanna get back up and try again. And so that's a great life lesson that I learned. And also, when the opportunity comes, you gotta take it. You know, you sit out there, you wait, you can wait 20, 30 minutes for a bomb. And when a set comes in and it's a good wave, you gotta go, turn and just make the most of it. And so I think it's the same with life, you know, when that opportunity comes, you gotta take it and you gotta make the most of it. Surfing has taught me a lot, but I think I still have a lot more to learn. It's a beautiful sport because you're out there with nature. I feel as when you're in the water, everyone is equal in the water.
In Mozambique, there's a renaissance of African surf culture taking place. For many, it's a source of pride. For others, it's an opportunity to share a piece of African culture with the world.
Being able to represent Mozambique as the first Mozambican surfer, that's as well just given me a lot of pride.
The story of Sung Min Cho, or Minnie, and his rise as a competitive surfer from Mozambique is featured in the book Afro Surf.
I got quite a little beautiful piece in there, and I'm so lucky and blessed to be in that book. I've seen it all over the world, and now in the age of social media, there's random days I wake up and I get tagged by someone who's in the other part of the world, opening the book and seeing that I'm in it.
The book is the creation of former X Games host and sports commentator Selema Masekela and the South African surf brand he co-founded.
Minnie is a classic, man. I met Minnie in Durban. He's an awesome kid. He's extremely selfless, like the way that he mentors and deals with the kids and the way that they look up to him and what he does in the water is special. I surfed with him for the first time in Durbs, and then I surfed with him at Jeffreys Bay, and I was just like, whoa, this kid is good. He wants to put Mozambican surfing on the map.
These days, you can find Masekela surfing the waters of California where he lives.
This is where I cut my teeth, you know, building a relationship with surfing.
When I paddle out and sit in the water, in between waves, where I'm able to sort of contemplate my being. Surfing is great, riding the waves is incredible, but it's that getting to be out there and leaving everything behind and really like commune with yourself, that to me is the greatest gift.
If you didn't know Masekela from the career he's made in extreme sports, you might know his surname anyway. Selema is the son of legendary South African jazz musician Hugh Masekela.
My dad's always with me when I'm out here. A lot of times in between waves, I'm singing my dad's songs. My father was really blown away by how musical and rhythmic surfing is, and snowboarding and skateboarding.
In co-creating the book Afro Surf, Selema combined his pride in his African heritage with his passion for surfing.
And I think that's what makes me excited about this book, is that it's going to redefine the way people think of surf culture.
A tradition that has deep undercurrents in Africa.
I mean, the earliest known record of surfing was in 1640 in Ghana. And they came into the ships and they saw Ghanaians deftly navigating the ocean in boats and on boards. For so long, the world was taught to think that that's just not something that Africans do or did. And what we are seeing in this explosion, this Afro surf renaissance, is a new beginning, an expansion of what global surf culture looks like.
Having been born and raised in the United States, but also having a connection to Africa, Masekela brings a unique perspective. He wants to refocus a long-held view.
I think that from the Western gaze, when people think of Africa, or when I hear people talk about Africa, it's usually, I really want to go on a safari. I can't wait to get to Africa and go and see the animals. And that is the general Western perception of Africa. A place with animals and some high peaks and people who desperately need our help. This is the richest continent on the planet. 54 countries, a diversity of culture and music and art and history and pageantry and so much that it gives.
His commitment to telling that story is something he shares with his late father.
He was like, hey, Africans, look around you. Look at your traditions, look at your culture, look at what you have to give, look at how much other places want to be us. Take pride in that and also take bits of in exchange with the rest of the world. And then to the rest of the world, my dad was like, go there, don't just go on safari, go touch, talk, taste, feel, move, shake yourself, engage, and realize why this place is so magical. So for me, this is my opportunity to do so through something that is dear to me, which is surfing.
On any given day here at Tofu Beach, you'll find locals out on the water in the lineup, ready to rip. A scene that's become more common in recent years as Mozambique rides the wave of a growing surf culture. More than just an increased interest in the sport, the lifestyle that's developing around surf here is opening doors for a new livelihood.
I have a small business of 5 boards that I started from nothing. Now I'm making grow. Or maybe in the next few years I have more 20 boards.
23-year-old Nelson Joaquim Jr. Namona is an instructor and avid surfer. His business is just one example of the opportunities now possible in what was once a fishing village.
The industry could provide more surf schools, surf shops, places where people can also get work, fixing boards. Yeah, surfing brands, providing Mozambican surf clothes, Mozambican surfboards. I would like to see that grows and give opportunity to the new generation.
A picture of the future for the people of Tofu and Mozambique that wasn't always visible before.
I would like to see Tofu with our brand board, like a Mozambican, with the color of Mozambican. And it will be great to Tofu. Everyone can come buy the surfboards from Mozambique, and we can have our brand. Maybe in 5 or maybe 10 years, maybe I'll have like my own brand of the boards, my own shop. Yeah, it would be good to Mozambican, to a lot of kids from here also.
For Armando and other young people in Tofu, those possibilities are now more realistic, according to Minnie Cho, who sees the rising swell leading to bigger things.
In this town specifically, this town is a very marine tourism-based town. And so once we get kids in the ocean, we find that they get very comfortable in the ocean, and then they can become surf instructors, lifeguards, dive instructors, dive masters, and there's a huge industry for jobs around the ocean.
Those who've witnessed the transformation in Tofu are optimistic.
Surf is bringing some of those things, but a lot of other things need to happen at the same time. And I feel like it's coming together, all this puzzle, and there's really hope for the community.
The future of surf culture here may now depend partly on how the people of Tofu and Mozambique take ownership of it.
I think what Mozambique can learn from what I saw while I was in Senegal and is taking place in other places in the continent is like, yeah, welcome those surfers that come from all over the world that want to show you the ways, but be the stewards of what that culture looks like and what it is. Open the surf schools, teach the lessons, open the bed and breakfasts. It doesn't have to be run by and dictated by people who don't have a sense of your culture and aren't from there.
It's very important for them to take their own ownership, because we will have local heroes. Yeah, I think that will be the best thing, to have a statue from a local hero surfer from Mozambique, from Tofo.
I think it's super, super important for us Mozambicans and for Africans in general to take ownership of brands and the surf industry. The way the surf industry is heading, you know, we should start to create our own brands and to support each other a lot more. When I was growing up, finding sponsorship was hard, you know. I would look for sponsors in other countries, and for example, South Africa. When I went to go look for sponsorship, they said, we don't sponsor surfers out of South Africa, but the brands are representing Africa, you know, it's this company Africa, this company Africa. And so to me, that didn't make sense in my head. It was very demoralizing to look for sponsors and know that there's no support unless you're South African. I hope that I'm part of the generation that receive support from companies within Mozambique, Mozambican companies supporting Mozambicans in surfing, you know. We've had the guys like Narciso who started way before me, and they were the first wave of surfers. They set it up for me to take on what they couldn't finish, and so I've taken on from them, and I've taken Mozambique out of this little village and taken surfing outside to the outer world.
Maybe something new will come. Watch.